everyone! Welcome to this rather unprecedented second debate stream between where we debate Saadia versus Kematu, and I have a new guest with me. Guest, would you like to introduce yourself?
Thank you. My name is the Senate Online, and I've come here to debate Acer Thorn about Saadia versus Kematu.
Alright, now, notice I'm wearing a slightly different cap this time. For some reason, my blue cap has disappeared off the face of the earth, so I'm pulling up my cap from my other Purple Politics channel. Don't worry, the next stream I do will have my full blue gear back, because I've already went and placed an order on Amazon for the blue one again. So, for this new debate stream, here's the thing we've agreed on. We've agreed, once again, to more or less the same rules for the debate that I had for my Skyrim video back in March of 2023. Not Skyrim, Stormcloaks video from back in 2023, which is those 6 rules about Bethesda sources only, soft cuts versus hard cuts, etc., etc. However, there is one one rule that I think that we have both agreed to toss out, and that is rule number 2, that the parties' stated motives are given precedence. That was a good rule in the Stormcloaks video, but it doesn't work here. The whole premise behind this quest is that someone is lying one way or another. Or is it? I'll definitely have something to say about that when we do the debate. Anyway, if we kept rule number 2, that means that we'd have to assume both that Saadia genuinely believes that she's fleeing mere assassins, and that Kematu genuinely believes that he's working for the government of Hammerfell. Unless there is explicit evidence to the contrary. But the evidence that either of them are lying is circumstantial at best, which is, in fact, the whole reason that this quest is so deliciously ambiguous to begin with. And so that assumption doesn't really work here. In the Civil War, it was entirely possible for both Ulfric, Stormcloak, and General Tullius to be entirely convinced of the sincerity of their own actions, and so the rule made sense there, but it doesn't make sense here, so the rule has to go. In its place, we have agreed to a new rule number 2, and that is Occam's razor. I briefly mentioned that philosophy in the Skyrim video, but it really needs to be front and center here. Occam's razor is the idea that when you are faced with 2 or more competing theories about what happened, the correct one is most likely the one that requires you to make the fewest assumptions. This, in my opinion, is the pitfall that Camelworks' massively popular video fell into. He started from the position that Kematu was in the right, and he worked from there. Every plot hole that stemmed from accepting that Kematu is telling the truth, he has to cover up with one ad hoc justification after another. That's not to say that Saadia's side of the story is entirely devoid of plot holes. After all, there is no perfect theory in this quest, which is the whole appeal of it. However, in my opinion, and this is what I'm going to be debating today, Saadia's side of the story requires that we make significantly fewer assumptions than Kematu's side of the story does. And in my opinion, the assumptions are not only quantitatively fewer, but they're much easier to swallow. So that is the new rule number 2 that we have both agreed to. So, now that we've gotten the preliminary stuff out of the way, Senate, why don't you start by making an opening argument?
Alright, thanks. Glad to be here again. And to start off, I would just like to confirm. So, Saadia's side of the story believes that Kematu and his Alik'r warriors are indeed assassins hired by the Aldemary Dominion, and you believe this, is that correct?
Well, I don't know if they were hired by the Dominion, but I do think that there's insufficient evidence that they're genuinely acting under color of law.
Okay, so being that obviously the word assassins was thrown out, and being that Saadia just sticking with what she says regarding them under the employ of the Aldemari Dominion, the first point that I would like to just run across is, if Kematu and his Alik'r warriors really were hired assassins, they would be the worst assassins in all of Tamriel. And I have a list of reasons here, but I'll just go by them a couple at a time here, just for simplicity's sake. And the first two reasons that kind of go hand in hand that I came to this conclusion is there is no effort of the Alik'r will traverse in broad daylight wherever they want, whenever they want, allowing the public eye to see them, right? Now, this wouldn't be normally a bad idea, because assassins can walk around during the day, you know, we do it in the Dark Brotherhood quest all the time. But this next point that I've come to is what makes this first point so important, and it's that not only do they traverse in broad daylight, they make no effort of concealing themselves at all whatsoever. We'll see an Alik'r warrior from a mile away, and they're easily recognizable, which is what allows the public to just, you know, talk, which will eventually get to Saadia's ear.
You know, this is an astute observation, except for a slight problem here. Obviously, I think the thing is that Bethesda kind of has a habit of programming NPCs who are way too blatantly open about their blatantly illegal acts. Like, take for example, son of a motherfucker. Told him to just... Okay, somebody has just posted saying stream seems to pause a lot on its own. Yeah. I'm sorry, I'm doing the best I can at the moment. Anyway... is that Bethesda tends to write a lot of their characters to just be open about their blatantly illegal activities, and one of the biggest examples of this comes in Morrowind. In Sata Need, there's the quest Death of a Taxman. You know what, I'm gonna do something here. I think this might help. Okay. In the quest Death of a Taxman, you're tasked with finding a killer who had just murdered some tax collector in cold blood, and he was some tax collector who was just doing his job, not breaking any laws, and somebody just murdered him in cold blood. You walk up to his girlfriend points the finger at one person, you walk up to him, and he just says, "Yeah, I did it." That is not narratively satisfying in the slightest. A lot of people, and like for example in Skyrim, we have the Thieves Guild who basically just practices their bullshit openly. So clearly, there's not a whole lot of thought placed into the fact that these cutthroats should be hiding what they're should be trying to be a bit more subtle in what they're doing. So you say that the Alik'r are the worst assassins in the world? I mean, bear in mind that... Oh my god. The stream quality is just so shitty right now.
Would it help if I turned my camera off?
Maybe? I don't know. It's worth a try. Okay, now that he's turned that off. The thing is... Oh god, where the hell was I? Senate, where was I?
You were talking about why they are not the worst assassins and why people, like the Thieves Guild, for instance, are openly, open about their illegal activities along those lines.
Okay. We have to remember that their search for Saadia got put to a sudden halt because they were causing trouble. Like, they must have done something. One of them got arrested, the other two got kicked out of the city. So, you say that they must be the worst assassins ever? Well, they kinda already are.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And to that point that you just made, that also further proves to their sheer incompetency. They got caught, one of them got caught, and two of them got kicked out of the city, meaning I assume the crime that they're committing is breaking into the city, being that one of the Alik'r warriors, when you show up to him, he says, "We're not causing any trouble, all we ask is to look for her." I'm under the, even though we don't know definitively, I'm under the impression that they snuck into the city without the, the okay from the guard. And again, as I said, this is just all the more evidence to the fact that they are incompetent assassins. Now, this point does go somewhere, but I have more points that really do hit this idea home that they're horrible, horrible assassins. One of them, as you mentioned for me, is the fact that they got caught. One of them got caught, and the other two were forced out by the guards. And another thing is that their nature as the Alik'r is extraordinarily predictable to someone like Saadia, who can outsmart them and outmaneuver them. And for all we know, she's been doing that for days, weeks, months, maybe even years out of being in Skyrim.
Yeah, but let's also, of course, the fact that they had to sneak into the city, which is what you're suggesting. This is the first time I've ever heard anyone suggest that they did anything other than just walk through the main gate. But in any event, if the fact that they have to sneak into the city, I'm pretty sure that alone proves that they're not even actually acting under color of law. Because if they were, they'd have a bit of a... Jarl Balgruuf would probably feel duty-bound to let them in if they were genuinely acting under color of law. So the fact that they are having to they're having to skirt the law is showing that they're on the wrong side of the law to begin with. And now, when I say they may not necessarily have been hired by the Thalmor, that's an important thing to consider here. By the way, I think you can turn your camera back on now. Okay.
Okay.
Yeah, and that's the thing you need to consider here. Is that we only assume that the Alik'r are working for the Thalmor because Saadia said it. But the thing is, Saadia wasn't even speaking with 100% confidence when she said it, and I even mentioned this in the last stream, that all she was really doing when we asked her, why are they after you? The only thing all she really did was make a guess. She doesn't know for sure. And because she's only the one being pursued, that makes sense. She doesn't have to know exactly why they want her. With Kematu, it's not that simple. It is undisputed that he wants to, at the very least, kidnap Saadia. That much is 100% undisputed. And at that point, you'd better know damn well exactly why you're doing that. Because if you don't have a good reason and you're not 100% certain of it, then that pretty much makes you in the wrong by default. So anyway, We don't. They may have been hired by the Found Lord. They may have been hired by just about anybody. As I pointed out in the last debate stream, the grudges, sometimes even homicidal grudges in Tamriel, can become extremely petty, like the contract to kill LeBurk. So it could have just been that Saadia one day spoke out against the Dominion, and then the next day she suddenly had assassins on her ass, but that could have just been coincidence, and she's only giving the best guess as to what she thinks is the thing, but in reality, it could have been anyone holding a grudge against her over just about anything. It could have. We don't really need to know exactly why Kematu is pursuing her. All we need to know is that it's not under color of law, and that pretty much puts the death blow to Kematu's case. That alone. Even if we don't know all the details, as long as we are confident that it's not under color of law, Kematu loses. Full stop.
Not necessarily, and the reason I say not necessarily is because we need to keep in mind and remember, and I'm sure that both of us can agree on this, and it's that they are of foreign jurisdiction regardless. Either way, they're Alik'r, whether they're hired assassins or whether they really are hired to take Saadia back to Hammerfell to face justice. They are of the foreign law of Hammerfell and in Skyrim. Just like your point about how it was illegal for Ulfric, even if it was Nord custom, to kill Torygg in combat, it was still illegal under Imperial law, which is why it made it not okay. And to that point, the reason why they are not under the law of Skyrim is because they're in Skyrim. It is very clear that they are not citizens of Skyrim. It is abundantly clear as for the first 2 points that I made, meaning it's not as easy, and for all we know, the people of Skyrim will look at these guys and they'll go, now why are foreign Alik'r warriors, people of Hammerfell, what are they doing in Skyrim? Like I said, I doubt that they can just go around and tell people, oh, we're looking for a woman, because again, that's just, they're mistrusting or they're mistrusted by the people of Skyrim from the very beginning, which is why...
Are you still there? I can't hear you anymore.
They really do anything and everything they can. If it really came to it, they'd leave the city and then they'd find another way in from the get-go. But they don't. They respect the guards and they flee back to Rorikstead where they're held up in. And that's another point that I came across, is that these guys are half willing to follow the law despite the fact that they're assassins. I mean, we as assassins in the Dark Brotherhood break in to Solitude to kill the Emperor. Even though he's just a ruse, we literally break into Solitude to kill the Emperor. And then when it's not him, we double back and we break into his ship to kill him. I think we can both agree that assassins have no moral code of law, that they are willing to break any law they have to. And in Saadia's words, these men are cunning and ruthless. And if they're so cunning and ruthless, they sure are quite incompetent enough to get caught. And not only that, respect the guards' wishes to exfil the city and not return.
It is a gray area. I'll give you that. However, I truly believe that if they really were acting on... bear in mind that you can still be incompetent and still be in the wrong. Like, for example, the Wet Bandits. They were incompetent as hell, and yet they were still the bad guys who absolutely deserved to get arrested at the end of that movie. Being incompetent doesn't make you in the right. Acting under color of law is what makes you in the right, and you say that they're incompetent, but if they were truly acting under color of law, they could have, at the very least, I see no reason why they wouldn't have at least attempted to appeal to Jarl Balgruuf for leave to conduct their business. I mean, sure, sure, that might have failed, but there's really no reason why there's no indication anywhere in the story that they even tried to go that route. And bear in mind, as I pointed out in the last debate stream, it is undisputed that Jarl Balgruuf is canonically the Jarl of Windhelm at the start of the quest, because...
You said Jarl of Windhelm, do you mean Whiterun?
Yeah, if I said Windhelm, I meant that. I mean, yeah, anyway. As I pointed out last time, Balgruuf is canonically the Jarl, full stop, because it starts at the time when... right after you kill the first dragon, but before you become Thane, which means that it's impossible for Vignar to be the Jarl at that point. So Balgruuf is one of the best Jarls in the game. He's one of the fairest and most noble Jarls in the entire game. And I see no reason why he wouldn't strongly believe in the rule of law if the Alik'r warriors were genuinely on the side of the rule of law. Now, bear in mind also, I meant to say this earlier, but it kind of slipped my mind. I'll say it now. Since it is undisputed that Kematu is wanting to, at the very least, kidnap Saadia, and that is absolutely undisputed, then as far as I'm concerned, the burden of proof lies with him.
Okay.
Hold on a minute.
Okay.
Hold on a minute. Let me, somebody in Discord just complained that the music in this stream is a bit too loud, so I'm turning it down a notch. Anyway.
Yeah, so that's an interesting point.
Anyway, I wasn't done yet.
Oh, my fault, sorry.
Anyway, as far as I'm concerned, so because of all of that, as far as I'm concerned, the burden of proof lies with him. And the only evidence we've ever received that he's acting under color of law is the fact that he says so. But of course, he says that right after you just killed about 100 men right in front of him all by yourself. Of course he's gonna say that. He's gonna say anything at that point. And you know what he doesn't actually have that he should have? Like an actual writ from a head of state? Like in Skyrim, when you get a bounty of more than 1,000 gold in a hold, bounty hunters from that hold will come and pursue you from all over Skyrim. Doesn't matter where you are. And when they do, the leader of that trio typically has a writ from the Jarl saying that they're authorized to kill you. It's also the same thing when you do a Radiant Bounty Hunter quest. Whenever you talk to an innkeeper or the steward, they'll say the Jarl's men came by and left this bounty letter, but they'll also give you a piece of paper that documents it, which we never use in the game. Nobody ever reads that for real in the game, but I think that in universe, canonically, that piece of paper in your inventory is meant to serve a function pretty much exactly like this one. If it's ever disputed that you're acting under color of law, you have this slip of paper that proves it. Kematu doesn't have anything of the sort. Now, to be fair, I can understand why Bethesda wouldn't have included that. Because if they had that, he couldn't have just whipped that up and forged that at the drop of a hat like that, so he must have had it the entire time, and at that point, there wouldn't really be any dispute. Kematu would be acting under color of law, and there's no two ways about it, and that would undermine the whole point of this quest, which is that there is no clear-cut right or wrong answer. But at the same time, the fact that he doesn't have this writ on him when most instances in the game usually have the NPC carrying some sort of writ or documentation like that, that does still put him at a massive disadvantage. And the fact that he was, and the fact that the burden of proof lies with Kematu in the first place means he's got some serious ground to make up in order to actually prove that he's acting under color of law. And frankly, there really is no significant evidence to suggest that he's doing that. So, as far as I'm concerned, there's a huge amount of stuff to make up for. He's got a lot of ground to cover, and Team Kematu, his supporters, they've got an uphill battle in order to convince me that he's in the right. Now, Ted Cruz with the top down, hello! You said, how do I do this in a way that makes the most money? Basically, you first you have to agree to bring Saadia out to the stables. Then Kematu will paralyze her, and he'll then talk to you and hand you the money. Then you gotta kill him, and then wait for Saadia's paralysis spell to wear off. Use a pacify spell on Saadia, and then talk to her, and she'll pay you herself, so you get double the payment, because you just killed Kematu in front of her. So basically, that's how you do it in a way that makes the most money. So, and then you ask, how do I do the quest wrong? There's really no wrong way to do the quest. I mean, I suppose you could just kill them both and then you don't get diddly dick, but why would you want to do that? So anyway, Senate, that is my argument as to where Kematu stands, in my opinion.
And to bring up a very valid argument, I will concede you do bring up a valid point that in anything in the code of law should require, surely should require written, documented proof, because we see it, as you said, in multiple examples in Skyrim. But, one thing I will say to that before I, continue with these remaining points that I have is we get it in Skyrim, in the province of Skyrim. We know how the rule of law works in Skyrim. We don't know how it works in Hammerfell, meaning to assume that the customs and what exactly encompasses it in Hammerfell, I mean, they might not even have prepared anything in general. I mean, imagine this. Even if they did have documented proof that they're looking for this woman named Iman, who goes by the ruse Saadia, they don't have hardly any information on her, which actually leads me to my next point, and it's that Kematu and his men have next to nothing on who Saadia is, on their target. They don't know her a good name, they don't have an accurate description, no day-to-day activities, no place of rest, and assassins, they have this knowledge. Even before we join the Dark Brotherhood, the Dragonborn, you can get random encounters with the Dark Brotherhood on some off-the-chart street near Whiterun at the middle of the night, and they'll come running right at you and try to kill you, and that is without the Night Mother. They will have found a way to found the Dragonborn without any known cause for whatsoever of where we could be. That alone tells me that an assassin should have all of that information, and the Alik'r have none of it whatsoever. They have they don't even know she's in Whiterun definitively. They just are searching Whiterun for all we know because they're doing their rounds. I mean, we see them in more places than just Whiterun. We see them all over the place in like Iverstead and Rorikstead, obviously. They're all over the place looking for her. For all we know, Whiterun is just They've got to check it off the list and, search for her there. Obviously, they're not being allowed to search for her there, but it's still a huge point of contention. I don't care what anybody says. All the assassins that we see in Skyrim have all this information down. Name, place of rest, day-to-day activities, all of that. You'll know where to find them, how to find them, what time to find them. And to that point, are you familiar with what the concept of risk of liability is?
I'm vaguely familiar with it, but again, if you're going where I think you're going with this, I just defer you to my earlier argument about how being incompetent doesn't mean they're right.
Oh, no, and trust me, this incompetency argument does lead to somewhere. It does. But risk of liability is, we know liability, it's the problem and struggle of having someone else know something that is important and crucial to the mission. And these guys are willing to pay information and talk to anybody they want regarding the location of Saadia. They're willing to talk to if they're willing to talk to us, the Dragonborn, a lowly guy just walking along the streets, it means that they're willing to talk to anybody. I think that point can be agreed upon by the both of us, that they probably have spoken to people before and are willing to pay up gold to anybody. And that is a huge liability risk in their mission of assassinating, whether they're hired by the Aldemari Dominion or not. An assassin would never, ever pay gold for information for someone else to go get them information. You just wouldn't do it. Why? Because we can clearly see the consequences of risking liability. That person approaching the target and warning them ahead of time of what's happening. And that's the most incompetent, horrible thing an assassin could possibly do. Anybody would look at you and go, "You're not even an assassin. You're just a joke," And the final point that I have on their incompetency, before I get to where this all leads to, is they are many in numbers. What's the commonality thing that we see amongst all assassins in Skyrim? They work alone, because that way there's a much, much less risk of liability than if you're working with multiple people. Because, it stacks up. You're working with a whole bunch of people who, for all we know, could be skilled at what they do, could not be skilled at what they do. It's just, you're totally, completely making the efficiency of your mission so downright horrible that it makes me wonder who in the Lord's name would ever hire these guys for their beef, or if it was the Aldemari Dominion. If it was the Aldemari Dominion, they would be horribly stupid for hiring the Alik'r of all people as assassins. And that's exactly the point that I'm trying to make by highlighting their incompetency, is based on what Saadia says, and I'm following what Saadia says, because she's the one who tells us that the Aldemari Dominion were the ones who hired them. Based on what she says, we know the Aldemari Dominion, the Thalmor, they're smart and cunning. They know what they're doing, even though they're evil and super messed up, and basically the all-around evil guys in the Elder Scrolls. They're smart, they're cunning, and they are decisive and efficient. And all these points that I just mentioned about their incompetency go against the idea that the Aldemari Dominion would hire these guys out. It makes no sense why they would hire these guys out as assassins based on just how stupid they are at their job.
Yeah, and you can argue the incompetency all day long. I'm really anxious to see where this is actually going, because I've already explained how incompetence doesn't mean they're right, and for that matter, it as I already pointed out, it doesn't necessarily have to have been the Thalmor who hired them, because Saadia doesn't know that for a fact. But the fact is, maybe whoever hired them is just light on the coin themselves, and so they hired them not because they're the best, but because they're the cheapest. And then you end up getting what you pay for. We're having to make a lot of guesses here, and I'm really anxious to hear where this is ultimately going, because right now, just the incompetence for its own sake. You've made a good point that they're grossly incompetent, that they're as incompetent as the Wet Bandits, but you haven't shown me that they're any less culpable than the Wet Bandits. So that's all I have to say about that.
Okay, and then I guess, yes, I will proceed then to this greater point of what I'm saying. Whether or not I'm not focused on speculating they couldn't have been hired. What Saadia tells me, the Dragonborn, and what she says with conviction, the first time, before she tells you why the Alik'r are after her, she says, and I quote, "They're the Alik'r under the employ of the Aldemary Dominion, and they wish to exchange my blood for gold." Now, I will go in later on in this debate about Saadia's explanation and how just all the holes in that, but for now I want to stick to the point of which she says, at basically dang near the beginning of the conversation, she tells us that these are Alik'r warriors under the employ of the Aldemary Dominion, and she says it with conviction, without, after she's calmed down from her little, spews of having a dagger pulled on you and all that, she, calms down, and when, she asks, or when you ask her who the Alik'r are, she will say, that they're, the Alik'r who are under the hire of the Aldemary. But that's what I'm focused on, is the fact that these guys are allegedly hired by the Thalmor, and where this incompetency argument comes from stems onto this very point, that the Aldemary Dominion would never hire these guys out. Keep in mind, this is what Saadia says. It's great, that you say, oh well, I mean, we have no idea who hired them, and you're right. We have no way of definitively knowing that the Aldemary Dominion hired out the Alik'r, but that, in my opinion, is just all evidence against Saadia's story. The fact that, okay, if they didn't hire her, who did? Keep in mind, she tells us it before she even explains her speculation of why they're after her. She tells us with conviction that they're after her, meaning this is something that she had to have thought of calculatingly, and spoke it out right there and in the moment. Not some, I'm panicked and I'm trying to think of a reason and whatnot. This was her telling us this as her standing story. You would have never said it if you were not sure. She would have said, well, I think they might be hired by the Aldemary Dominion. She didn't say she thinks. She said it with conviction that she knows. And I have a whole plethora of points that we can go through in my notes here regarding why the Aldemary Dominion would never have hired these guys out, because that's what I'm focused on here, is why they would never, and why they could never have hired out the Alik'r as assassins.
Yeah, well, I mean, she has had quite a long time to think about this. I mean, bear in mind, her entire identity at the moment, the identity of Saadia, is designed exclusively to hide from them, so clearly she's put a lot of thought into this, and she might be speculating a lot. I can understand how she might have long ago come to the conclusion that the Aldemary Dominion are the most likely culprits, but until we know for certain, unless she has some direct first-hand observations which concretely tell her this, I'm not really gonna hold it against her if she's making a claim and is 90% certain of it, or even 99% certain of it, and she just ends up being wrong. See, the difference between Saadia and Kematu is that Saadia can be wrong without being a liar. Kematu can't. And that makes a world of difference here. So, you try to mention this this line that because that just gels with what she's always been always assumed her whole life. And you try to pin that on her like she's now bound by it. I mean, even in let's be completely real here. Her entire conversation with us, with the Dragonborn, was in a panic. Like, she, even when she acted calm and collected, she still was panicking. She had her dagger out the entire time. So people can say things with confidence despite even when their back is to the wall. Kematu does it later in the same quest. After you've cut through about 100 men like butter, he just is cool as a cucumber, but he really has no reason to be. I mean, you've just slaughtered 100 men all by yourself. He knows he can't defeat you, and yet he's just I mean, of course he's gonna act all cool and collected. He is, and yet the average person would probably be all like Sean Grayson. You know, you're gonna rebuke me in the name of Jesus? Pow, 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 pow. Just instantly, just reflex shot. Just pull out his gun and start firing. But that's not. I mean, Kematu has clearly displayed a level of swag and confidence that just, at least here in the United States, we are not used to seeing in our law enforcement officers when they're put in that kind of position. Honestly, I commend Saadia for being as cool and collected as she was, given the fact that she was quite literally hiding for her life, and her back was to the wall. You say that she says this one line with absolute confidence. I mean, it sounded like that, but then again, I don't see that as all that dispositive here.
And that's fair, but there is one thing I will wholeheartedly disagree with, and it's that she is panicked the entire time, and that she can be wrong without lying. Both of those points I thoroughly disagree with, and the reason why is because in preparation for this debate, I did go back multiple times and really just kind of ran myself through just the sequence of dialogue that runs between the Dragonborn and Saadia, and after investigating this and kind of breaking it down, Saadia has this, and I guess I've arrived here a lot sooner than I would have, but I mean, I might as well speak on it since we're on the topic of Saadia has this very changing demeanor when she speaks with us. She is not just like, at the beginning, she's panicked. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about that. But then she goes from a switched demeanor to calm and calculated to this play dumb attitude, to calm and calculated into this, and then to this play dumb attitude. And I'll highlight this here in my notes here that I've written out, is when she's cold and calculated, and this is the first point I want to bring up, is when she's panicking, right? We obviously agree that she is very much panicking, initially, and rightfully so. She's afraid of that the Alik'r might already be on her and know where she is, since she assumes, which is again another really weird point when the Dragonborn presents himself and says, "Did you know some Red Guards are looking for you?" And she assumes that they've already found her, despite the fact that we have said nothing of the sorts, that we've given information away, nothing of the sorts of that they already know where she is, or that they're coming for her. We just said that they're looking for her, and she already assumes, what, they found me? In her little panicked-induced moment, and then she accurately assumes that, what did they offer you? Gold? Meaning she's very familiar with how the Alik'r function and work. she's no stranger to them and how they operate. And the point that I'd like to just kind of get your opinion on and take on is there are two different dialogue options that the Dragonborn, the player, can present to Saadia. It's the second and third one, where you can, in dialogue option 2, you ask, or part of what you say is, they just asked me to find you, and I quote, and dialogue option 3 is, put that thing down before you get hurt, that thing down regarding her dagger. You can say either one of those in the dialogue option, and it'll basically lead to Saadia saying the same thing, where she will plead to us initially without explanation at all that we, quote unquote, we just can't help the Alik'r, and instead of explaining why. Now, if I was to proclaim my innocence to somebody, if I was truly innocent of any and all crime and I knew I was being pursued by people unjustly, when I can think back, even if she doesn't know why, what she did, because obviously speaking out against the Alik'r, speaking out against the Aldemari Dominion is not illegal. Like, you have a free right to do that, and that's not illegal. So I would be proclaiming my innocence and why in as calm and cool of a manner as I can, but instead she just tells us, in her panic moment, you just can't help them. Why doesn't she explain to us right then and there? Why does she not take the initiative like Kematu does in telling us why we can't help her?
Well, I think she actually does drop a line that hints at that during the conversation. Guards and Jarls can be bought. In other words, she's probably speaking from past experiences, back when she was hiding somewhere else under a different name, that the corrupt-ass guards of wherever she was just basically just lulled her into a false sense of security and sold her out, and she narrowly managed to escape. She basically, and bear in mind, I'm not trying to answer this with definitive proof. I'm saying you asked for why would she do that, and I'm giving the best answer I can. So, and you mentioned, but the fact is, I'd also like to ask, there's also something interesting here, is this also begs the question of why Saadia needs to keep hopping from hiding spot to hiding spot in the first place. If she actually sold out the town of Tenneth to the Dominion during the war, in which, for the record, that is literally the only explanation that would exonerate Kematu. Because he, again, burden of proof lies on him. He has to prove he's acting under color of law, and he is 100% confident in the reason why he's pursuing her. So he's either telling the truth or he's guilty. There's no in between. So if Saadia really did that, which is the only explanation that exonerates Kematu, no other even if Saadia did something, committed some kind of crime, Kematu is still lying to us, and therefore he's guilty. Even if Saadia is also guilty. So, if Saadia actually did that, why does she have to hide in a city where there is no Thalmor presence? Why wouldn't she just be hiding with the Thalmor and be under their protection? There's and even if she's supposed to be hiding somewhere inconspicuously, why Whiterun of all places? Because there's no Thalmor presence there to protect her if things go south. And my best evidence for this, you could just say that there's no Thalmor NPCs, but that's just a game mechanic because the population is so small for game scaling purposes. But in universe, my best evidence for there being no Thalmor presence in Whiterun is Heimskr. If there was any Thalmor agents in Whiterun, you'd think that Heimskr would be their top priority. Getting him out of the way. Shutting him up. So the fact that he's still there in broad daylight proves that the Thalmor have no presence in Whiterun. And in fact, there's even some... Hold on a minute, let me... Let me... I even... Hold on. Yeah, here we go. I'm gonna share my screen with you. Just a minute here. Hold on. Where? Which one? Ah, here we go. So I'm gonna share this. Yeah, as you can see here, Saadia, after 8 p.m., she will stop cooking and focus on serving customers. She was supposed to go listen to Heimskir preaching outside, but doesn't due to an oversight. So, if she was a Thalmor agent, why would she be blatantly violating the White Gold Concordat by attending? And this is a soft cut. She has. It's only due to an oversight that this doesn't actually happen. So, according to the rules we agreed to, this counts as a soft cut, and therefore it is still canon. The fact, therefore, and so, the fact is, her behavior, the fact that she's in Whiterun instead of, for example, the Thalmor Embassy, or the fact that, and the fact that she is, at least canonically, if not in-game, canonically, doing something that the Thalmor would absolutely detest, she's not acting like she's with the Thalmor. Even when she isn't, like, putting up the act, she still is acting like she's just like she's just a red guard. So, whoever hired Kematu, if it's literally anyone but the Hammerfell government, Kematu is guilty. There is no, just full stop. But if Saadia was hired by, if Saadia was an agent for the Dominion, she is behaving in a way that just does not align with that at all. So, do you have anything to say about that?
Yeah, a lot of information said there, and one of the points I want to get back to that you mentioned, I know there was a lot of stuff there said and I want to cover it, but there's just a point to start out at the very beginning of your rebuttal that I would like to point out, and it's, you said that part of, in defense to what I spoke about in Saadia's initial confrontation with the Dragonborn, that you said that guards and Jarls can be bought, and I just would like to point out that she only mentions this when you bring up the dialogue option of why haven't you gone to the guards for help with this. And keep in mind, this is a very, very late into the conversation dialogue option, and you don't even have to ask it, meaning there's a chance that in anybody's playthrough, she might not even mention this idea about guards and Jarls can be bought with this, which is her explanation. So that to me is not a viable defense to her side of the story. And while yes, Kematu should take the initiative in presenting evidence that would show that he is rightfully hired from Hammerfell, from the houses in Hammerfell, to bring Saadia back to face justice, you have to keep in mind that she is the one who speaks with us first, meaning they always tell you make a good first impression, and this is the first impression that she needs to make that is going to make or break my decision on whether or not I want to help her or not. And after, like I said, I don't think that the idea that her explanation of guards and Jarls can be bought is a viable explanation to her kind of change in demeanor, because, and on top of that, her contradictions, because like I said, what I'm focused on is Saadia's side of the story that she explains to me. If you're innocent, you have nothing to hide, and if you're innocent, then they always say it's easier to tell the truth than it is to spin a lie, right? Like, that's just common practice, right? Now, if you rehearse a lie, yes, but the point is that if we're speaking from a down-to-earth perspective here, it's always easier to tell the truth for anybody who's telling it, you know? And Saadia, as I was saying, goes from this strange demeanor of panicked to cold and calculated to this play dumb attitude, and then she kind of goes back and forth there. I mean, she's panicked initially, we know that. That's very, very clear, in which when we ask her about the Alik'r, her first accusation is the Alik'r are assassins hired by the Dominion. They wish to exchange my blood for gold. That's her explanation. The very first one she gives regarding this entire matter, that's what's supposed to stick on the wall. That's what's going to be held to her in court. The defendant is held to their side of the story. It's not just some, we have to have only the, it's not in court. You don't just deal with the plaintiff, always being the only one who can come after the defendant. The defendant doesn't just sit on their tush and wait for the jury to decide. They have to present themselves too. And Saadia does it in a very half-assed manner, because following what she says in her explanation about the Alik'r being assassins, she commands us that, and says, and I quote, "I need you to root them out and drive them away before they drag me back to Hammerfell for an execution." And that, to me, is a huge red flag that I don't ever recall you mentioning in the previous stream or in your video of why Saadia is correct, is this dialogue right here. She immediately commands us, a stranger, without offering any gold whatsoever to us, commanding us with conviction to root them out and drive them away before they drag me back to Hammerfell for an execution. And that's after she says the word assassins. I'll tell you, you would never use the word assassin if you weren't implying they were going to kill you. Okay? She uses the word assassins and then follows up by saying they're going to drag her back to Hammerfell for an execution. And it's funny because I think that Saadia just inadvertently spoke the truth there. That line right there, that they're going to drag her back to Hammerfell for an execution, that's one of the few lines of dialogue that both support Kematu's intent, because his intent is to bring her back to Hammerfell, and she just said in her own words that you got to stop them before they bring me back to Hammerfell for an execution. Why? You would never hire assassins to kidnap her and take her all the way back to. It would be a waste of resources on the Dominion's part. What do you have to say about that?
Okay, so there's 3 points you made just now that I'd like to tackle. First is the fact that the branching path dialogue. You argue that it's possible for us to have this conversation without her ever saying that guards and jarls can be bought. You say that you use the fact that dialogue is optional as an excuse to just dismiss it out of hand and not even really give it all that much consideration. And I find that argument to be rather weak, because this whole quest is very non-linear and has a lot of branching paths. It's only by playing the quest multiple times that we actually get the full picture, and that's one of the beauties of it. So if you're going to hand wave something as being of no real consequence to the overall determination, or being of minimal consequence to the overall determination, simply because it's possible to go through the quest without hearing it, I find that to be a rather weak argument, honestly. Now, the next one, you say that if you're innocent, you have nothing to fear, and I absolutely 100% think you're full of shit. Sorry about the expletive, but let me put it this way. We have previously discussed doing political debates over on my other channel, and you've made it clear that politically speaking, you are a conservative, which means you are you are pretty much a staunch supporter of Back the Blue. Which, here's the thing. The police are trained in the real world, police are trained professionals at taking everything you say and just twisting it to suit the agenda that they've already and you could literally offer just about anything. Oh my god. Okay, to the person who just messaged me on Discord, you are not part of the debate. Please butt out. Wait your turn. Okay. Son of a bitch. Here's the thing. The police are trained professionals at just taking anything you say. You could literally give them an explanation that completely exonerates you and tell them exactly where they can go and find evidence that corroborates this. And they will just somehow spin it to... I'm muting this damn channel for the next hour. Thank you. And they will just spin it to say that, oh, he's confessing to being guilty. You say if you're innocent, you have nothing to fear. What you are basically saying there is that the Fifth Amendment in the U.S. Constitution, the right to remain silent, that exists exclusively to protect the guilty. But it makes sense. You really think the Founding Fathers would have put that right in the Constitution if it only protected the guilty and not anyone else? No. It was put in the Constitution to protect people from
from incriminating themselves.
Yeah, but not just necessarily from incriminating themselves. It was put in there so that if you say nothing, police can't use it against you. Because, I mean, if you've ever been in a toxic relationship with a narcissistic boyfriend or girlfriend, or maybe even a narcissistic parent, where nothing you say is ever good enough for them, they'll always find some way to twist your words and make you the bad guy, then you know exactly how it feels, how it's honestly better to just say nothing at all. So no, you say if you're innocent, you have nothing to fear. Oh, yes, you do. Oh, yes, you do. So no, I'm completely gonna say no to your argument that if Saadia was innocent, she has nothing to fear. No, that doesn't mean a damn thing. Okay, now the third and final thing you mentioned. She mentions that you're going to bring her back that they're going to bring her back to Hammerfell for an execution. Bear in mind that by your own admission, at that point, it's still very early in the conversation. She is still, if not in full, maybe she's not in full-blown panic mode, but she is coming down off the high from being in full-on panic mode, and so what she says there is kind of taken with a grain of salt. Now, I will concede to this. Earlier, at the very start of this stream, I conceded that her side of the story is not perfect. The question is, whose side requires fewer assumptions? This is admittedly one of those times when I have to give a nominal point to Team Kematu. I did actually mention it last stream. You said you don't remember. It was near the end. But, I did mention it last stream, and the more I've thought about it, the more I do realize this is admittedly a nominal point in favor of Kematu. But really, though, the fact that she was still at least half panicking means that it isn't quite as it isn't quite as incriminating as you make it sound. And frankly, I personally feel that the fact that you are placing so much stock in Saadia's panicked confession, the fact that it was and the fact that you say that this is pretty much that this pretty much makes, or by your exact words, I believe, were that it makes or breaks your decision to help her, almost as if your entire verdict is based solely on this one conversation. I consider that to be incredibly short-sighted, and even from a game design standpoint, I'm pretty sure it's kind of doing the rest of the quest a gross disservice, because Bethesda went to such great lengths to set up this extravagant puzzle for us to solve, and you're only looking at part of it. I mean, like, let me put it this way. There's a guy who I follow on TikTok who does Minecraft videos that are guess the block in 60 seconds or guess the mob in 60 seconds. And it would be, you treat he gives 6 hints in each video. And imagine if he just started the hint by saying, guess the mob in 60 seconds. Hint number 1, you can get wool from this mob. Do we really need the other 5 hints at that point? And you seem to be treating this, Saadia's conversation with us, her first conversation with us, as if it was a dead giveaway just like that. But I believe that by doing that, and you're significantly downplaying all of the other clues elsewhere in the quest that I believe deserve to be considered just as importantly. So those are the 3 points that I wanted to retort against.
Of course, and I will say you did bring up a point, and I should have specified before that obviously in court, the defendant, it's not just only the defendant. Obviously, both speak on terms. What I meant to say was, and what I intended was, it makes a great big deal what the defendant says. You can't undercut it. And now, like I said, it's not the only thing that will determine in court. I'm just saying that it could be a big deal depending on the words you use, in that sense. And shoot. Hold on, it's right there on the tip of my tongue. So to that idea, we are not in a court of law in this aspect. The police conduct their operations because they're cops and they're trying to incriminate you, and I wholeheartedly believe that the Fifth Amendment was created with that exact purpose of what you said, and furthermore, to not incriminate yourself, because you run the risk of saying something that could put a guilty stamp on your forehead when you're not guilty. And that doesn't exist in Skyrim. In Skyrim, it's your word, and that's what this quest is. It's your word versus Kematu, or her word versus Kematu's word. And her word is the word I get first, and it's not to say that I'm not going to listen to Kematu's word, because I have listened to Kematu's word. And, we want to talk about assumptions, who has the more assumptions to make. You still have yet to address the contradiction of, you say that Saadia is still in kind of a downward panic mode. I've listened to the dialogue, the actual dialogue that goes on, and how Saadia composes herself, and I would actually argue to disagree that she is no longer in a state of panic after she tell her, or after she calms down from her, how much were there, how much gold did they offer you, yada yada, to, you've yet to establish the contradiction and the change in demeanor in how Saadia composes herself when she goes from all panicked to conviction and telling us, I need you to root them out and drive them away before they drag him back to Hammerfell for an execution. Cold and that's still a contradiction that I feel has not been addressed yet in what you said, and there's more to it than just that, of course. I mean, the Dragonborn can respond with, how am I supposed to get rid of them? And by the way, before I say the next part, when I say the fact that Saadia doesn't have to mention that dialogue. Yes, it's important to go through all the dialogue, but what I'm trying to say here is that there is a very fine line between someone who takes the initiative to explain their side of the story versus someone who is having to ask the questions to get the story out. Okay, as I said, the reason why I said that if I'm innocent, I have not much to fear is because I can speak confidently on myself if I'm innocent of any and all crime. Saadia doesn't do this. She goes from speaking with conviction to even going as far as to telling us what to do without even offering us anything, to this play dumb attitude because you'll further up go for the conversation of how am I supposed to get rid of them, and she'll respond saying they're mercenaries, another contradiction. I like to let it be known here and now that the words assassin and mercenary are not interchangeable. These are not two words that you can use simultaneously like they mean the same thing. They don't. Even though they do similar jobs, and they can be similar jobs, they are not interchangeable words, make no mistake. When you use the word assassin, you imply that someone is out to kill you, and that's what we see in Skyrim the whole way through. Assassin, he's here to kill you. Assassin, yeah, that's hitman, whatever you want to call it. That's the implication that they're here to kill you, and that's their mission. Mercenary encompasses a whole range, widely have to do with military missions when it comes to mercenaries. That's yet another contradiction that Saadia says. And they're only in it for the money. Now, here's an interesting point that I want to run by you. Saadia says they're mercenaries, just ignore that contradiction for a second, and that they're only in it for the money. How are you going to explain that side of the story when they have paid out so many people just to find her? You clearly are indicating that they're being paid as assassins. Why would you not be paid? That's an obvious staple. Yet they're willing to pay the Dragonborn for any information. Kematu's willing to pay you for helping him, and furthermore, they're willing to pay bandits to stay in their little cave. They're paying out so many people, losing out on money, and being that there's multiple people, I assume that multiple of them have to be paid for their contribution to what's going on here, because that's what mercenaries do. They all get paid in accordance to fulfilling a mission, as Saadia says, or assassins, whichever one it is, I have no idea. Yet they're willing to throw around so much money in return to capture her. How do you call them assassins that were hired out if they're willing to do that? Plus, the other stuff that I mentioned.
Okay, so I'm going to go through that. First, you mentioned that I haven't addressed the contradiction in her change in demeanor. It is very important to note that when it comes to first of all, there is no such thing as a human lie detector. When police in the real world do interrogations and they try to focus on these red flags that make it highly likely that people are lying, no, those are all completely unreliable. They have been scientifically proven consistently across the board to not actually be reliable indicators that somebody's actually lying. Like, I've heard theories that if somebody is looking up diagonally to the left or up diagonally to the right, that can dictate whether they're pulling from their memories or trying to pull from the creative lobe of their brain, which is absolute horseshit. Every single solitary theory that has ever been postulated, that has ever been set forth and adopted by law enforcement about how you can tell if somebody is lying, has repeatedly failed to hold up to scrutiny in double-blind studies. There just is no such thing as a lie detector. Not a human lie detector. There's not a mechanical lie detector. It just doesn't happen. You might as well be saying that police have the ability to read minds. There is no such thing. So to answer your question that I repeatedly failed to address her contradictions in her change in demeanor, I haven't addressed it because, scientifically speaking, it means fuck all. She could go from panicked to calm and collected to smooth to panicked to absolute batshit crazy, woo, and then back to calm and collected again, and it wouldn't make a damn bit of difference. Like, she could literally just strip off her clothes and cut her left nipple off with her dagger, and it wouldn't change the likelihood that she's lying or telling the truth one damn bit. Okay, there's just her change in demeanor. I mean, you might as well be calling attention to the fact that her clothes are brown. Like, it would make about as much difference. The only difference is that there's a common misconception as to how much it actually matters. I've heard, like, you could, in the real world, it's often said that you could literally just flip a coin and have that be just as reliable of an indicator that somebody is lying, except with a coin toss, you know it's random, and so you're not lulled into a false sense of security. So, no, your ideas that your argument that her change in demeanor means anything, no, it does not. Just absolutely horse shit. So no. So that's why I haven't addressed her change in demeanor, because there's nothing to address. Now, the next one you said, innocent people can give a calm account. Again, no. People can absolutely know that they're innocent and still be nervous as hell when talking to police. That's, again, the Fifth Amendment's right to silence was designed to protect innocent people, because no politicians are going to put rights in the Constitution that only protect the guilty. That's just not how the Founding Fathers would have worked. Innocent people, you act like the fact that she's unable to give a calm account is itself just I was listening to you, and you made it seem, and from my point of view, you made it sound like it's almost 100% of the time that you either can give a calm account or you're guilty, and there's a very, very little in between. No, I wholly disagree with that. And so the next one you said, you actually put a lot of emphasis on the fact that assassin and mercenary aren't the same thing, and frankly, I think that's a rather nitpick. So I'm just gonna I mean, Saadia could very easily have confused the two without the fact that you felt the need to point that out alone proves it's not common knowledge. So that being said, this is the closest you came in that in your last turn to speak that actually came relatively close to making a good point. They keep throwing money around. Yeah, they're in it for the money, but that doesn't mean, of course, you gotta spend money to make money, and like we can both agree on, they're kind of imbecilic. They certainly aren't the sharpest tools in the shed, so as far as they're concerned, paying for information is probably the best way to reach their end game. The fact that you keep acting like the fact that they're doing this and they're doing that necessarily proves that they're actually acting under color of law. And honestly, I just don't see it. I'm sorry, but the points you're making are just in the orbit of proving that they're acting under color of law, but they very rarely actually actually go and actually hit the bullseye. They certainly aren't hitting the bullseye. Most of them are completely missing the target altogether. So that's my rebuttals to those 4 points.
Okay, and so here's the deal. The Dragonborn's not a cop. Okay. Now I hear what you're saying. I hear and understand what you're saying about cops and about not incriminating. I hear all of that, and I understand what you're saying. The Dragonborn is far more along the lines of a juror, not a police officer. Let's get that squared away and straight with. So these rebuttals and arguments about cops and in the real world in the United States in general are, they're not wrong. They're just a little off-putting to the conversation at hand here. I'm not saying they're irrelevant. I'm just saying they're a little off-putting to, exactly what I'm presenting here. You can't view this from the perspective of we're a cop interrogating an innocent person or a person who could be, having done a crime. We're an innocent bystander who Saadia dragged us into secrecy and privacy to talk to us. So, with that being said, when it comes to someone who's lying, I'm not saying lie detectors exist, okay? Now, obviously, there are no definitive telltale ways to find a liar, okay? You're right. The police don't read minds. We're not lie detectors. There's no definitive 100% way. But the reason I put emphasis on this is because if I hadn't completed the rest of the mission and listened to everybody's sides of the story, listened to all the dialogue that can be said over, do you think I would be, just hard pinning these lines that Saadia is presenting to us? No, because I go back and I look at all the other stuff that I looked at and I see, hold on a minute, she said this and this is actually how it is. She said that, this is actually how it is. Why would she say this if it wasn't true, or why would she say that if it wasn't true? You need to understand that this mission is obviously the reason why it's so rich in discussion and why it's still being discussed 12 years later is because it's a matter of who's lying and who's telling the truth, as you said at the beginning of this debate. And the thing is that I'm speaking from a strictly down-to-earth perspective of assassin equals someone who kills. Mercenary might not indicate that to someone. Just you say the word. What do you think? You ask someone what first comes to mind when you think of the word assassin. They might tell you kill. What first comes to mind when you think of someone who says, or to someone who says the word mercenary? They might say kill, but they might also say something along the lines of job or military or something along those lines. My point is that the reason I say these are not interchangeable, and the reason why I put so much emphasis on this is not nitpicking. This is actually something that is important. She knowingly uses 2 different words to describe these guys, and anyone is going to look at that and go, now hang on a second, those are 2 different things. Which are they, assassins or mercenaries? That's why I made emphasis to it. It's not some nitpicky type of deal where, the fact is that, it all the more proves that she's innocent. And, to talk about throwing the money around, when you're getting a job done and when the money has to be split evenly amongst all the people who are participating, all the Alik'r warriors, and yes, you're right, you gotta spend money to make money, but an assassin, a proper assassin, has all the information they're willing to pay. In general, they don't need a place of rest like Swindler's Den, because they go in, they get the job done, and they're out. They don't need to pay any amount of gold at all, because they already have that. We've seen it time and time and time again throughout the Dark Brotherhood quest lines and even assassins outside of the Dark Brotherhood. So then it comes to the question of, at what cost are they doing this? How much money are they really willing to throw around to the point where, yeah, sure, you got to spend money to make money, but are you really going to spend all the same amount of money? And we don't know how much gold they were hired for by whoever it is that they hired for, according to Saadia, the Dominion. How much are they willing to spend to the point where it becomes a total, complete lost cause, where they break even with the amount of gold they receive versus how much they spent, just to capture one girl who spoke out against the Dominion? And another thing that I want to talk about is, to your point about Heimskir, that is all the more reason against Saadia's claim. She spoke out against the Dominion in Hammerfell. Now, I'm going to listen to what she says in her testimony, because that's what you do when you investigate this. You don't assume, oh, well, she could have been hired out by somebody else. I'm listening to what she says and how she explains herself. She could have just told us, I don't know who hired me. She could have just said they were assassins who were hired to kill me, and we would have said, oh, okay. But no, she points out the fact that they are Aldemari assassins that come to kill us, which then brings me to my point of, do you remember how I was mentioning incompetency? If I'm sticking to the story of Saadia, that these are assassins hired by the Aldemari Dominion, we have two very fine lines of what an actual Thalmor assassin looks like versus these alleged assassins hired by the Aldemari Dominion. And of course, the other instance I'm referring to is the assassin hired to kill Malborn. We can see a very clear distinction between one man who blends in perfectly with the Khajiit caravans, waiting, biding his time like an American sniper in the wilderness, waiting for Malborn. And if it weren't for Malborn's wits and smarts, he's worked for the Thalmor. He knows what's up. He knows who they are, and he knew from the moment he left the cave that the Thalmor will be hunting him for the rest of his life. That is probably the only thing that saved him from being brutally murdered by the Khajiit on the side of the road at Windhelm. If he wasn't smart like that, he'd be dead, because he would have tried to make a run for Morrowind, and he would have gotten killed by that Khajiit. It was only him bringing it upon us, the Dragonborn, that and he doesn't even know definitively. He speaks to the idea and speculation that he could be an assassin. And I'll tell you one thing, the first time I passed by that Khajiit, when he was with the Khajiit caravans, didn't think nothing of it. Wouldn't have even dared to talking to him whatsoever. And notice about that, when you try to talk to that Khajiit, he sends you away. He sends you away saying, I don't want to talk to you. That's an actual Thalmor assassin that we know of is a Thalmor assassin that has all the trademark qualities of an assassin. No risk of liability, working alone, blending in perfectly. Compared to the Alik'r, who are, as I told you earlier, laughably incompetent. So are you really going to try to suggest to me that the Aldemari Dominion are the ones who hired these guys? And now you might say again, oh, well, they might not have been hired by them. Then why did Saadia tell us that? She would never have told us that and incriminated herself like that if she could have been wrong. And she speaks, as I said, this is important. How someone conveys their points to you is important. She explains to us, after being panicked, that they were assassins hired into the employ of the Aldemari Dominion. I've listened to her dialogue. She sounds pretty calm and composed to me. I don't know about you, but she doesn't sound very panic-induced in her voice. Followed by saying, I need you to drive them out or root them out and drive them away before they drag me back to Hammerfell for an execution. That's my rebuttal.
Okay, so there's actually a lot to unpack there. So 7 points that I actually jotted down here. So that's actually a lot for so far. Anyway,
sorry if that's overwhelming. I don't mean to be overwhelming.
No, I'll just go through each of these one at a time, like I've been doing. Dragonborn isn't a cop; he's more of a juror. I'd say he's a lot more than just a juror. I'd say he's pretty much judge, jury, and executioner here. Like, whatever you decide to go with is ultimately what's going to happen. Like, if you surrender her to Kematu, Saadia's gonna die. If you kill Kematu, whoever sent him isn't gonna send anyone else, and she can rest easy. And she even mentions how she plans to go back to Hammerfell soon, although that never happens. Though I think that's more of the fact that the quest is more like soft frozen in time, similar to how after you complete the Civil War, the moot is supposed to be just around the corner, but it never happens. That's just because Bethesda never programmed it in. It's still going to be just around the corner in canon. And likewise, I think if Saadia survives, her returning to Hammerfell is likewise going to be just around the corner in canon. You're a lot more than just a juror. You're the judge, jury, and borderline executioner here. And sometimes you're the literal executioner. The only time you're not the executioner is if he takes her away and then she's killed off screen. But nearly any other way to resolve this quest is going to involve you being the direct executioner. So you're a lot more than just the juror here. And because you fill so many hats in this quest, you kind of take on a massive responsibility, and I think that just makes it all the more important that you understand all of the various psychological pitfalls that you could potentially fall into. For one, if you're serving on a jury in real life, yeah, you can't just kind of like sit back, rest on your laurels, and assume that the judge and the lawyers have all worked out what evidence is going to be admissible, and all of that other stuff that you're not really qualified to handle. And you can just, if you hear the evidence at trial, you can then just turn your brain off and just assume that it was determined to be admissible, and you don't have to actually think about that. If you're serving on a jury in the real world, that is the privilege that you get. But here, we have to do a lot. We have to do a lot more than just that. And I believe that with that comes great responsibility as well. And you seem to be shirking your responsibility and only thinking about this from a jury's point of view, when you should also be looking at it from a cops, investigators, and judges' point of view as well. And I believe in doing that, you're missing out on the big picture. Now, the next one, this is one of the biggest ones here. You say that you aren't just listening to Saadia's story and making a decision just on that alone. You're actually cross-referencing it with everything else that happens in the quest and pointing out how Saadia's story, in your opinion, doesn't hold up. To be fair, we've been at this for over an hour and a half, and we still haven't quite gotten past the first conversation yet. And in my opinion, I think we should probably start discussing the other stuff in the quest, since by your own admission, that's just as important to mention, to discuss, to actually reaching an ultimate conclusion in the matter. So
that's fair. That's respectful.
So after I get done with this, I would like it if we actually moved on a bit, though I think we should probably take like a brief intermission after this anyway. The next point you wanted to make. What do you think instinctively when you hear the word assassin versus what you hear when you hear the word mercenary? Well, when you hear the word mercenary, you certainly start to think of not necessarily acting under color of law. Mercenaries can be acting under color of law, like if you're a bounty hunter, but it's largely it's largely I'm in business for myself first kind of thing. I'd also like to think, what do you think, and what do you instinctively think when you hear the word police officer? When you hear that, you instinctively think of justice and following the law and upholding it and all that stuff. If she had called Kematu a cop, maybe you might be onto something, that she's calling him something that inherently carries a label that is against her interests. But calling him a mercenary, I'm trying to think of something that would be analogous to. It would almost be like, I mean, it would almost be like calling him a governor when you meant to just call him a mayor or something. That's probably not a good example. It's basically, you're only slightly up promoting him. It's only a minor promotion at that point. To call him a mercenary, because mercenaries can absolutely be vigilantes, no doubt. So, I'm sorry, but I just see that only as the most minor of nitpicks here. Next, you mention how assassins typically already have all the information. Not really. I think that's more of a game design philosophy, where the person who gives you all the information, that NPC just exposits everything onto you. The problem with that, however, is that those people had to have gotten the information from somewhere. We just don't know where. It is preposterous to assume that the assassins don't have to do any detective work, and in fact, there's even a quest in the Dark Brotherhood where you do actually have to find someone. Both in Skyrim and in Oblivion. In Oblivion, you go to the Imperial City and you need to find Phalion, the skooma addict, but you've got to actually start doing some detective work. You got to pay some people off to have them tell you where he is. Then you got to start charming his wife so that she'll spill the beans. Then you got to go and get some skooma, which is going to cost a pretty penny, so that Phalion will trust you. And so, yeah, even in the Dark Brotherhood in Oblivion, you gotta actually spend money to make money. And that's the player character, not just your Argonian boss, who's already done most of that work for you, which itself would have necessarily required a similar amount of detective work and a similar amount of spending money to make money. But then, later on in Skyrim, there's another quest where you have to do your own detective work, which is when you're trying to track down the gourmet. And admittedly, the only time you can just you can threaten them, because there's an intimidation mechanic in Skyrim that wasn't present in Oblivion, but I'd say that's mostly a mechanic and not an actual canon thing, because you also have the option of paying a bribe, and you also have the option of using a speech persuasion skill in order to sweet talk them into giving away the information voluntarily. But both the Markarth cook and the innkeeper at the inn, I forget exactly where it is, what it's called, both, and the innkeeper there, you have to actually get them to tell you information that is valuable to that. So you say that an assassin necessarily has all the information he needs to begin with? No, he doesn't. Even in the majority of Dark Brotherhood quests, where you're given the information on a silver platter, that's just you being given that information, but that information had to have come from somewhere in universe. So, no, I'm sorry, I don't see that as very persuasive, and And once again, and next you say, I'm listening to what she says, and you're listening to her testimony, and not giving her, you're not just gonna assume it might have been someone other than the Thalmor because she never says that. Once again, I think you're just putting way too much stock in what she's saying, and I assume that's just one of those things that we're just going to have to agree to disagree on. Her testimony is only one piece of the puzzle, and I mean, I'm not going to say that I just do not believe that she should be strictly bound by what she, but just by the things that she blurted out under heavy duress, no less, in the spur of the moment. It's certainly a factor, but you just stand by doggedly that she said to Thalmor, therefore it's Thalmor or nothing. I would say that's the case with Kematu, but that's only because it's undisputed that he's trying to either kill or at least kidnap her, and so, as I mentioned earlier, the burden of proof lies on him. So, to prove that he's acting under color of law. I do not believe that it applies to Saadia, and honestly, I've just said my piece on that. And with all due respect, I prefer if we moved on from that. And so the next one, what do Thalmor assassins actually look like? And you mentioned that the Thalmor would never ever employ them, but here's the thing. Whether it's the Thalmor, whether it's the Hammerfell government, whether it's Yomama, it doesn't matter. Someone employed them. So, you say that it would... Your argument that it wasn't the Thalmor who hired them is because the Thalmor would never hire them, but shouldn't that same logic also apply to the Hammerfell government? That would... why would the Hammerfell government ever hire anyone as incompetent as them?
Because that's the only one they can hire. They can't just reach out to other people like that.
Why wouldn't they just... You would think they would have practically an entire army of these kinds of people who they could train up and do that with. They're the government of an entire province. You'd think they would have at least a good 1,000 people, SWAT officers, that they would be able to have for such an occasion. The important thing is that someone had to have hired them. That much is undisputed. So their incompetence is not a bar to them being hired, as evidenced by the fact that they got hired. That is basically my responses to that, and honestly, I was now that we've been spending like a good hour and 45 minutes on this. What do you think about taking about a 10 to 15 minute intermission?
That's fine with me. We can do that.
Yeah. Okay. We'll be back at 11:50. Well, it's Central Time Zone right now, so it says 11:39 right now. I'm gonna switch to intermission mode in a minute, and we'll be back at 11:50 a.m. Central Time. That's 12:50 Eastern Time. All right. So we'll take a break. Quick break. Intermission. All right, and we are back. So, during the intermission, we agreed that we had discussed Saadia's opening conversation enough, so now we're going to move on to the next leg of the quest, which is the Alik'r warrior that we interrogate while he's in jail. So, he basically told a huge red flag on Kematu when he straight up said that if you meet him and he's not like you're not like working for him, he's gonna kill you. That Alik'r warrior straight up said that if you meet him, it'll be your end. And this is like when Camelworks did their majorly successful video a few years ago, their only real retort against this was, oh, well, it's wrong, so it must be because Kematu behaves differently the one time you interact with him after this. So this Alik'r warrior who had no reason to lie to us, he must have been wrong about Kematu, even though he's known Kematu for years. So I trust this one interaction with him after when his back is to the wall and he knows he can't beat us. So of course then he's gonna say things. He's gonna say anything. So this Alik'r warrior who didn't have a similar gun to his head and had no reason to lie, he must have been wrong, and this guy who's back against the wall was right. That's really all Camelworks' retort is. So I was wondering if you might have a better explanation for why this Alik'r warrior would have portrayed his former boss so heinously.
Yeah, so that's an interesting point. The prisoner in the Whiterun cell is absolutely a key point in that we are directed to him by Saadia, and which I've looked at this over, and he in this mission has always been kind of an oddball. And what I will say is, he doesn't know who we are. He doesn't know the Dragonborn is a dragon-slaying badass, right? For all he knows, we could just be some...
You're Superman. He thinks we're just Clark Kent.
Yeah, exactly. And that makes sense, checks out in my mind, which is why he would go, whoa, why is some commoner, coming to me to try... I mean, surely he must know that Kematu is held up with his other Alik'r warriors inside of Swindler's Den, even though he didn't quite say, to meet Kematu would be to meet your end. I think it could be reasonably implied, you go to Swindler's Den and you're going to find a hornet's nest, in a sense. Just the danger in general, because with Kematu comes his warriors. Now, his warriors have betrayed.
You're breaking up. The last thing I heard clearly was hornet's nest. Can you start from there? Are you? Can you?
One moment. Yeah, I'm here. Yeah, I can hear you. 1 second. I'm not still breaking up, am I?
Right now you're not.
Okay, I'll restart from there then. So basically what I was trying to say to simplify it is, maybe he wasn't just talking about Kematu, but go to
breaking up again. I can't hear you at all right now. You're like it sounds like you're saying blah, 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 blah. That's what it sounds like you're saying.
1 second. Let me see if I can change something here. How's this? Am I still breaking up?
Well, again, not at the moment, but we have to test it pro.
Right, well, let me know if I am.
All right.
Okay. Hornet's Nest, a lot of Alik'r warriors. It'd be dangerous for us to go, and that's exactly what the prisoner highlights. Is to go to Swindler's Den would be to meet your end, and that I firmly believe. And it's weird because obviously we know he was betrayed, and left to rot in the jail by being captured, but from his Alik'r warriors. But he still has that desire to come forth. And now, do I think the prisoner is wrong? No, because again, he doesn't know who he's talking to. He doesn't know that the Dragonborn just slayed a dragon outside of Whiterun. He doesn't know that. He's locked in prison. But he does openly admit that he was clumsy enough to get captured, and I think it's still kind of ironic how he says that, they're supposed to be the best of the best despite their incompetency, but, that's obviously we've already discussed that. But what do you think about it do you think the prisoner helps or hurts Kematu's case?
Oh, I mean, I think he hurts it. And you mentioned that you think he's just talking about Swindler's Den and how the inhabitants of Swindler's Den are going to know are what's going to kill him, and he thinks and you think that's the threat that he's talking about. I couldn't disagree more. Here's the thing. He only mentions Swindler's Den after we buy his way out of jail, and now he never actually gets released. But I think that's just another one of those frozen in time things. Yeah, because all they have to do is open the gate once, and then he's out. I mean, what are they never going to open it? How are they going to bring in food if they don't do that?
It's just a humor thing, the guard lost keys and whatnot.
So the fact that he stays in there for the rest of the game, that's just one of those quest frozen in time things.
Yeah, no, 100%.
Yeah, in any event, he only mentions Swindler's Den after you've bought his way out of jail, and he realizes that that's the actual information you were looking for. The minute you name drop Kematu, he isn't acting on the assumption that you're looking to get into Swindler's Den. He's acting on the assumption that you want to meet Kematu. And he says, with 100% confidence, and you and I seem to agree that in the right circumstances, when you say it with such confidence, it means something. He says, if you know that name, you know to meet him, not to just enter the place where he is, but to meet him is to meet your end.
Yeah.
And so
because where he is where his Alik'r warriors are, right?
Not necessarily, but just to meet him as well. But also he's saying that as if it's something you should already know, despite the fact that he assumes you don't know about Swindler's Den. So meeting him, from our point of view, as far as he's concerned, does not necessarily include going to Swindler's Den. It's only after he tells you that we know to do that. But before that, it would be like saying, I want to fly to the sun. What do you have, a death wish? If you know about the sun, you know that to get that close to it would be to meet your end. It doesn't mean, you're going to have to get to this phantom ship, with this phantom drive in it in order to make it there. Yeah, he doesn't tell you that, and he doesn't tell you about the dangers of the phantom drive on the spaceship, because frankly, getting that close to the sun alone is going to be suicide for you. And the way he portrays Kematu in that, for lack of a better word, outburst, it's as if Kematu, not simply the hornet's nest, but Kematu himself is the one where if you meet him, you're dead. And that's what the Alik'r warrior clearly is trying to portray about his former boss.
Yeah, no, yeah, 100%. I agree that he emphasizes that, and like I said, I'm not like trying to suggest. Obviously, the Alik'r War, you and me both agree that he suggests and emphasizes Kematu specifically. But me more along the lines of I'm pointing out the idea that Kematu, where we see him in Swindler's Den, the Dragonborn asks, I need to find Kematu, where is he hiding? Meaning, the prisoner knows, like, number one, how the heck do you know that name? Number two, you must be caught up in this business that's going on here between, with what Kematu's going on. Because do you think a random commoner would know who Kematu is if they hadn't spoken with Saadia at all? And she hadn't, I mean, she's the one who tells us about it, but I digress. Basically, whether it's Kematu who's the danger or his hornet's nest of Alik'r warriors, cut it however you want. We ask where he's hiding, meaning he knows the prisoner at least knows the intent of what we're going after. We want to find out his lair and his base. That's no secret. He obviously knows where that is, Swindler's Den, right? And I think, can it be logically assumed that said Alik'r warrior knows that there are other Alik'r warriors with Kematu? Surely it can be presumed, yes? That Kematu won't be alone.
Yeah.
Okay. So then, with that being said, I don't think it's too far of a stretch to suggest that he could not only be talking about Kematu, but, the hornet's nest that is all those Alik'r warriors plus Kematu. And in my opinion, that would further justify his sheer outburst of, what, do you have a death wish or something? Like, because you and me both agree, that is a huge outburst where you're like, whoa, that's a lot of energy. And me personally, I would, if he was talking not just about Kematu and his skilled prowess and as a warrior, but as, along with all the other Alik'r warriors, that makes sense to me and would check out his, why he was the way he was.
But here's the thing. You're skipping over something. He knows that you're trying to find Kematu. What he doesn't know, at least not necessarily, is that you're trying to get into a fight with Kematu. And yet he just assumes you walk up to Kematu, he cuts your head off. Then, it's just like there's how, as far as he knows, you just want to talk to Kematu and tell him, hey, Saadia is in the Banner Mare in Whiterun. I found her for you. Can I have my money now? As far as he knows, that's what you want to do. He doesn't know you want to get into a fight with Kematu, and yet he just assumes that they're just going to resort to killing you on sight. Which, for the record, the bandits who normally reside there and are playing host, they tend to they are just going to kill you on sight. They are just going to attack you on sight because they're just ruthless cutthroats. And for the record, I do think it was a huge fumble on Bethesda's part that they do not take into account the quality of the armor you're wearing when NPCs are sizing up what you're capable of in combat in these dialogues. That's a big immersion breaker, but then again, that's the problem with the whole damn game, not just this one.
Yeah, and plus, they could have done it too, because, hold guards will comment on your armor too. They'll be like, oh, ebony armor, well, that's such a wondrous sight. So, they could have done it. And also, something else I wanted to mention is that the bandits actually don't, lock onto you and attack you at Swindler's Den. They will hold out their weapon and say, hey, you need to get the heck out of here. And if you get too close, then that's when they, will come after you. And of course, if you're inside Swindler's Den, then you're an intruder in their little base. But, that's not saying that they're not still cutthroats. They're bandits,
Yeah, they are outlaws. Yeah. But, to be fair, I think there's a lot of bandits camps out there where the front door guardsmen will issue a similar warning to you. So I don't think that's even remotely unique to Swindler's Den.
No, yeah, I know. I'm just saying, in terms of their nature, they're not out here, the moment they see you, they're charging after you like a saber cat to a deer. They're gonna tell you to, bugger off at first, to a point about them attacking you and locking on. But,
yeah, I'm just saying that if Bethesda had designed it better, then the Alik'r warrior could probably just size you up, see your muscles, see your armor, and realize you're probably much more of a badass than if you were just a scrawny pencil neck geek wearing a brown tunic. You know?
Yeah. No, and to play devil's advocate for a second, it is a low-level quest, which means I would imagine, now don't get me wrong, I'm not justifying the fact that Bethesda shouldn't have still done this, but, because we obviously see this more than just once with this mission. We see it all the time in Skyrim, throughout the game, as we level up, but it is a low-level quest, and it probably was implied by them that, oh, they're either going to have, like, iron armor, leather armor. I mean, this would be just before we're Thane, and right after we killed the dragon in front of the tower, so that's just my only say to that.
And even then, we would have had about a dozen Whiterun guards helping us.
Yeah.
But at the same time, the Alik'r warriors aren't clad in any armor at all, and are wielding swords that are basically the equivalent to steel swords. So it's not like they're just decked out in full ebony armor. So
no. But stats are a thing in this game. Even NPCs have stats and, perks, even perks as much as so. So that is still something that should be considered, that, as I said before, Kematu is a renowned warrior, hence his emphasis.
So, what, so the, in any event, yeah, as far as I'm concerned, the Alik'r warriors basically had no reason to suspect that we wanted to do anything other than talk to Kematu, and yet he's acting like if you try to do even that much, they're just gonna kill you. He portrays Kematu as one of those shoot first, ask questions later kind of guys, and it's only after you put his back to the wall that he even tries to parlay with you.
That I will disagree with slightly, halfway forward, because don't get me wrong, obviously there is intent that can be implied here by the Dragonborn when we ask, I need to find Kematu, where is he, and where is he hiding? And this is just a matter of how you perceive it and how, it comes off to you. Now, I'm under the impression that you believe that the prisoner thought that we had only the motive just to talk to Kematu. Is that what you believe in?
I believe that the Alik'r warrior in prison, the Alik'r prisoner, I don't think I'm of the belief that he didn't think it mattered what our intentions were. We meet Kematu, we die. It's as simple as that as far as he's concerned.
Okay. Just to touch on motive, though. Now, obviously, he doesn't mention, he doesn't even bother asking why we would, but I can see a path of how it's implied, or how it can be implied what we're after. Because, again, he acts surprised, saying, do you have a death wish then? It could be logical to assume that, based on the fact that we know Kematu's name, that we had to have somehow gotten into this matter of, him hunting down Saadia, and Saadia on the run from him. Somehow. How else would we find out Kematu's name? Which means that somebody had to have asked us, Saadia, to go and find him and kill him. So that much I can tell you would be assured that the prisoner might imply. But like I said, there's not much point in going too deep into it, because he doesn't tell us specifically, oh, what, do you want to meet him and talk to him? Or, talking to him will meet your end? He just says to meet him will meet your end. And, so like I said, it's not too much for me to go into regarding motive. I'm just saying it could be implied that he already knows or has an idea of what we're after. But you do still hold credibility in what you say regarding, to meet him. He does say the words "meet him" would meet your end, and I'll concede that you are correct in that assessment. I'm just saying it shouldn't be ignored that motive could be implied here, based on, because again, you wouldn't know Kematu's name unless you were in some tricky business involved in them.
Yeah, well, I mean, I do find it kind of telling that you tend to give the Alik'r prisoner the benefit of the doubt and try to think of ways in which you can interpret his words, even though he admits to being rightfully belonging to be in that cell, and yet Saadia, the woman who's actually a law-abiding citizen and who's just a quiet barmaid, you hold her strictly to the limited letter of what she says. It's kind of like you've kind of prejudged the case a bit. But of course, I'm not going to harp too much on that. I mean, I think we've gotten as much as we could possibly get out of that little detour, because the character wasn't really meant to be any more than a transition character. So I think now we should.
The prisoner you're referring to when you say that?
The prisoner.
Okay. Yeah, I agree with that.
Yeah, so we pretty much gleaned everything we can out of that section of the quest, so I think we should
move on to Swindler's Den.
Yeah, Swindler's Den itself. Of course, Swindler's Den itself is literally just a dungeon. Like, there's nothing special about the location itself. Nothing we can really get out of that. So we go through Swindler's Den. We cut through the entire bandit group like butter, and Kematu realizes, holy shit, I'm in over my head. I can't beat this guy. And so he thinks on his feet, and here in the Discord DMs, you actually put a lot of store in the fact that he actually tells his men to stand down. Like in the last debate, I played a clip from Dragon Ball where
I remember it.
Yeah, where Goku basically did to the Red Ribbon Army what the Dragonborn does to Swindler's Den, and then Lieutenant Black, Staff Officer Black, starts trying to parlay with Goku, but and you say that the biggest difference there is that Black never told those guys to stand down, whereas Kematu does, which, in your opinion, seems to make all the difference in the world.
Not all the difference in the world, but what I will say remarking that is, it is a difference that I noticed in the clip that was shown versus what actually happens, because, even though were paying the bandits, the bandits were not affiliated with the mission of the Alik'r in no way. They were just being paid. I mean, even the conversation between the two bandits, if we're being stealth and we listen in on them and eavesdrop, they'll say, oh, who cares why they're here? The point is they're paying us and we're going to be all the richer for it, almost as if they're mocking the Alik'r for, having to take shelter with them in Swindler's Den. But, yes, we cut through a bunch of bandits. Whether we slice through them like butter or not is irrelevant, whether we're low level, high level, yeah, you get the idea. But it's a noticeable difference. Now, I'm not saying that Kematu didn't try to commit parlay, because he absolutely did, in a sense that, he tells us, state your hand, warrior. It's clear that you've proven your strength in battle. Now let's avoid any more bloodshed. I think you and I have some things to talk about, right? Those are the words that he says, and, take that as you will. It's under the impression that, he knows you killed those bandits, right? I think it can be logically implied that he knows you killed those bandits, right?
I mean, you did it in front of him.
Well, not necessarily in front of him. He was in a separate part of the cave, and the bandits obviously are up front, but, hear it, not see it, whatever you want to call it, I think he knows, okay? Now, the reason why I point out the difference, though, in the clip you showed to the clip with Kematu is, Kematu still, yes, you just cut through a bunch of bandits, but they're bandits. Do you really think they have that much fighting expertise? Like, we're talking about Alik'r warriors here, who none of them have we have fought yet. Keep in mind, you don't fight any Alik'r warriors, only bandits, as you make your way through Swindler's Den. So Kematu respects us as a warrior for getting there, yet, as I said, there's been no clash whatsoever between the two. So my point here is, in the clip you showed, what was his name, Lieutenant Black?
Yeah, Staff Officer Black. What, you
okay,
watched Dragon Ball before?
No, I confess to that.
Maybe we could start doing a reaction series, you and me, later on this stream.
Yeah, that would be quite funny. I mean, I guess I should say I've seen parts of Dragon Ball from my friends, but to get back on topic, all of of Staff Officer Black's men in the clip, from what I remember at least, are cut down by Goku. He's the only one left standing, which absolutely wouldn't make sense why he would imply parlay with Goku. Kematu, on the other hand, you know, he hasn't taken a gander yet as to, oh, I'm absolutely screwed. He has men with him, Alik'r men, and it is possible for there is no guarantee. Now, like I said, if we're taking this from the assumption that, you know, you kill the dragon, but you haven't become Thane yet, like if you're doing the mission around that point, around that level of player, it is possible to die to those Alik'r warriors, meaning it's not like, I mean, Goku, I haven't watched the show, but I'm very familiar with Goku's power. The guy is insane.
Oh, he can rip entire planets asunder with his beard.
Oh, yeah. It's hilarious, the story of when he just accidentally sneezes or something like that and knocks over the guy in the arena who was supposed to be the champion. It's hilarious. He's insanely powerful. And obviously the Dragonborn is too, but at the time of the mission, we're not there yet, based on the level we get that mission. Now, of course, you can be there if you don't do the mission for a while, but I'm just speaking from a strict term of, yeah, from when we do it. We only have the Foos shout unlocked, canonically from when the timeline that happens and when we get these missions. So that's where I'm speaking from, of, you're a good warrior who just killed a bunch of bandits. Kematu sees that, and he wants to parlay because he's like, hey, I know that that fighting this guy would not necessarily guarantee my victory. Because if you knew you could win against somebody, one guy, then you'd go, hey, I don't want to talk to you. Let's just cut him down and beat it at that. And you're even outnumbered too at that. But he's smart enough to recognize that this would be a gamble on whether or not we could kill him or not. I don't know if we can win, so let's talk things through. And plus, I think it can be implied that he knows why you're there.
It's kind of like how lawyers in a civil lawsuit might still pursue litigation even if they think their clients are in the right.
Yeah. So all in all, like I said, only Saadia could have pointed out the name Kematu, and only the prisoner could have, or I shouldn't say the prisoner, only one of his own could have pointed to Swindler's Den, right? Like, that's the only way he knows, which means that would logically conclude to me that he knows and has spoken to people who are in this debacle about finding Saadia. He has to have, and of course he would be right in that assumption, and of course he doesn't specifically say it, but based on his own conversation with us in his first interaction of telling his Alik'r to hold and saying, let's avoid any more bloodshed, I think you and I have some things to talk about. It is quite similar, I will concede, to how Staff Officer Black conveys himself to Goku, but it's so abundantly clear that he does that to save his own skin. Kematu, on the other hand, wants to do this because not only does he know that the Dragonborn knows what's up, he is familiar with how this conflict that's going on, but he knows information. Obviously, he found Kematu, and so he wants to see if he can approach this with some diplomacy.
Yeah. I mean, at the same time, you're not really completely discrediting my original point, so I'm going to assume that my original point is at least halfway uncontested, and that,
which was
that he's basically just shitting his pants.
I'll give it half credit, like I said. As I said before, I wouldn't compare this to the Goku versus Lieutenant Black situation, because he just saw all his men get wiped away. I would be scared out of my pants trying to parlay with Goku and want to talk. Kematu, on the other hand, yes, you cut through bandits, but you haven't faced off with his own men yet. He doesn't know who could win, which, again, is still justification to your point of wanting to pursue diplomacy instead of fight it out. Because, again, if a 50-50 coin flip gamble is enough to dissuade somebody, like, ooh, wow, this is a coin flip right here, and I don't know if I want to leave this up to chance like that. So I'm kind of half conceding to what you said, but at the same time, my rebuttal in what I said still stands of why I am only partially agreeing with what you...
I think, basically our points are that I think he's completely shitting his pants, you think he's erring on the side of caution.
And seeing benefit out of, what about talking? That's the other thing, is that he sees benefit from talking with you, and of course he does, because the Dragonborn has the option to help him out. Lieutenant Black, on the other hand, I think you and I can both agree that he's doing that strictly to save his own skin. He doesn't care about helping Goku.
And that's what I thought, and that's what I've always assumed that Kematu was doing. In any event, we humor Kematu, and we start talking to him, and the things that he says, in my opinion, are just as much red flags as what you think Saadia is saying are red flags. Let's start by saying that he is accusing Saadia of something that could only have happened at a minimum 20 years ago. Even though Saadia is only about 30, so if she committed this treason, she would have only been a 10-year-old girl at the time. This was something that I pointed out in my first video on the subject, and I've yet to see anybody make a really convincing argument. Camelworks' only real argument here is that she just looks young for her age, and I'm gonna do something else here. Hang on. I'm gonna share something else. Do another screen share with you. There actually is precedent for this. Like, check this out.
Oh, honey, I'm 60. I'm 60 years old. I was born on October 25th, 1963. There actually is plenty of stuff. There actually is some examples we can use.
That is actually the point that I was going to mention. Is I'll have concede this to you as well. Now, what I will say is, for as old of a game as this is, I think we can kind of agree that there are kind of fine lines between the ages of people. Like, you either have a kid, someone who's anywhere between 20 and 50, and then you have someone who's very clearly in their 70s and up. Like, some people from the College of Winterhold, the Alteration Mage guy, who I can't remember his name, he's very clearly probably in his 70s, 80s, based on his voice, his gray hair, all of that stuff. And then, of course, you have kids. You don't have teenagers in this game. You just have kids, like the Riverwood children, who could be anywhere between 10 and 12. So the ages in this game are, and I really don't like this, but it's hard to look at an NPC and know definitively what their age is. I don't know if you agree with that or not, but it's the way that they designed how their voice sounds, how they were designed in game. Like, obviously, if you took a look at Saadia without a second gander in the world, you'd go, oh, she's young, she's spry, she's totally fine. And to that point, and I will say, I struggled on it. I struggled on your point a lot of how Saadia doesn't look a day over 30. But, I thought about it and I looked at it and I'm like, well, hold on a second. Let's take a look at women who could be in their 40s and 50s. And some women can look as spry and as young as ever, even though they are rather old. a woman in her 40s. I mean, you can look up women in her 40s as the video you showed. I mean, that woman was 60, but like 40s, they have hardly any graying out that happens. They have hardly just any frailty of old age. So to suggest that Saadia could be in her 40s, I don't think is a stretch at all. I think it could be very easily plausible. 50s, as I said, it's a bit more of a toss-up. And, you know, even in looking at Saadia's picture, you know, if you kind of squint at it, you can kind of see, you know, frailty, like wrinkly skin, and, you know, maybe even graying of hair and stuff like that. But like I said, it's a pushover, and it's kind of a stab in the dark, and it's something that I looked at where I'm like, I can't say this with confidence. So with that, I will concede of, I can't, it's too tough to tell based on how Bethesda designed how their NPCs look versus how old they could, because we don't have the option to ask Saadia for her age. I mean, you'd think that, you know, obviously we think to ourselves, oh, well, we know that this discrepancy, there are discrepancies on both sides, right? Like, the discrepancy for Kematu's side is, hold on, we don't know her age. And this happened many, many years ago. And of course, you have the discrepancy that we've talked about for Saadia, but that's kind of my consensus for the point. What say you?
You say that it is not entirely outside the realm of possibility that Saadia could be a lot older than 30. But if you actually scrutinize the dialogue, you realize that it's pretty much impossible that she's much over 30. And here's the thing. This is something that we've actually haven't mentioned in this debate up until now. Is that even the Alik'r themselves don't know exactly who they're looking for. They are harassing Redguard women out in the wilderness who, frankly, look nothing like Saadia, because all they really have to go on is that she's a Redguard woman hiding out in Skyrim. But they don't even know exactly what she looks like.
Only facial feature they have is this scar, and that's it.
Exactly, and Camelworks says that that's not something that a nobleman would have gotten, but that's not true. Odysseus had a scar on his leg that his old servants recognized immediately, even while he was in disguise. And he was the king. So I'm sorry, Camelworks, if you're watching, but no, the fact that she has a scar on her face doesn't prove jack shit. Anyway, they don't know exactly who they're looking for, but as soon as you confront Kematu, he starts listing off things. What did she offer you? Money? What did she appeal to your sense of honor? Your sense of greed?
Oh.
Perhaps a more base need? Those last two words, base need. Clearly, he's talking about sex appeal, which means that he believes that sex appeal is still a viable option for her. She has to actually be at least as attractive as that 60-year-old woman I just showed you. And the fact is, and now combine that with the fact that he doesn't know exactly who he's looking for. He only knows that she's a Redguard woman who is attractive enough to that sex appeal is a valid thing that she could weaponize in her favor. And that means he must assume that she's in the age range where that would actually be viable, because he doesn't have any way of knowing. Because if she is actually old enough that she would have been tried as an adult 20 years ago, and he does then she's going to be losing some of that sex appeal by now, yet he expects it to be viable. So the fact is, the odds that if she is just a lot older than she looks, then Kematu was really taking a huge shot in the dark by suggesting that she's sexier than her age, than most women her age. So the fact is, he just really took a huge shot in the dark that just happened to be correct. I mean, I don't know if obviously it's not necessarily correct that she appealed to a more base need, but it is a huge shot in the dark that happened to be correct, that would have been a viable option for her if she had decided to go that route. And that is that he pretty much gave himself away, in my opinion, there, that when he basically admitted that she's young enough to use that to her advantage, but if she is young enough to use that to her advantage, and he admits to that, then that also means that he admits that she was way too young 20 years ago, that she could be fully held accountable for treason. And there's another thing that he also says that completely goes against, that I also consider to be not just a red flag, but the crimsonest of red flags here, is that the fight against the Dominion is alive and well in Hammerfell. Which here in the DMs, you said that could be interpreted any number of ways, but you don't really go into more detail. Oh, I would love to hear this, because in my opinion, there is literally just no amount of could have been this isms that you can possibly justify that you can possibly offer to make this anything other than a bald-faced lie. So, by all means, the floor is yours.
Thank you. And yes, absolutely. I told you that in anticipation because I remember your emphasis on that line, and I realized, now hang on a minute, it's not so clear and cut and dry as that. And yes, I do indeed have a rebuttal for that and more of what you said prior. But I will focus on what we just said now. Kematu's line about the resistance to the Dominion is alive and well in Hammerfell, and they want justice. Resistance does not imply fully and completely that they are actively fighting. Even if it is implying actively fighting, that does not mean fighting let me give you an example. That would have easily been coined around in the anywhere between the 50s and the 80s, and it's the resistance against communism is alive and well in the West. It was alive and well in the West, right? That's something that anybody could have said, and it would have been absolutely true. Does that mean necessarily that there's fighting going on between the Soviet Union and the United States? No. Obviously, there was no direct war that happened, but obviously the United States was resisting the spread of communism from the Soviet Union and just resisting their influence in general. You had the Western Bloc and the Iron Curtain and everything, and their efforts in trying to prevent the Soviet Union from spreading their communism all over the world and their influence and trying to expand the Warsaw Pact. That, my friend, is an area that I saw where I was like, hold on a second. Resistance does not necessarily imply that they're actively fighting each other. You could say the resistance against the Soviets is alive and well in the United States. The Red Scare, they were searching all over the place for potential communists in spies, just anybody who could have been a communist in general. In the United States. That sounds like a resistance to me, and I would fully, pin that could be a resistance. So that's kind of my consensus of where I see Kematu's line of the resistance against the Dominion is alive and well. It is. They actively resist he doesn't say specifically what he's talking about. If he said that fighting is alive and well, or that we're actively fighting the Aldemary Dominion, then yeah, I'd say, boom, red flag right there. The war is over now. They are not directly fighting each other. But again, for 20 years of the Great War having ended, even the Hammerfell has been making sure that the Thalmor and Dominion are in line and that they are not breaking treaty stipulations. Are you familiar with a group known as the Remnants? And this is a group that is Redguard descendants. It's a Redguard network that's located in Hammerfell and Skyrim that, and you can look this up, this is on the UESP. It's a group of Redguard network that ensure that the Thalmor and Aldmeri Dominion are not breaking the treaty stipulations of the Second Treaty of Stros Mackay. Yeah, this is an actual group that is on the UESP, and this, to me, is very clearly indicative of the resistance against the Dominion. It's just an example to tell you of the idea that the resistance is alive and well in Hammerfell, if that makes, sense.
Okay. To that, I say this. You mentioned the resistance against communism, but to that I say there's a big difference between there being a resistance against an ideology and a resistance against an organization. I mean, it would be like you mentioned the resistance against communism. I think that Kematu's statement is more akin to, in the real world, in the 1950s and 60s, saying that the resistance against the Third Reich is alive and well. By that point, the Third Reich was dead and buried. And now, obviously, the Thalmor aren't dead and buried. They are still active, but they have basically been driven out of Hammerfell. Like, they don't even have so much as an outpost there, as far as I'm aware. Now,
not that I'm aware of either in lore, so...
Yeah. So, what exactly is there to resist that in Hammerfell, like actually within Hammerfell's borders, what exactly are these remnants doing? Are they just, surrounding the perimeter of Hammerfell and watching through binoculars to make sure that the Thalmor don't come sailing up again?
Keep in mind... sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
Yeah, because I will concede, I had never heard of these guys before, because apparently there's something like in the background of Skyrim lore, but I as you can clearly see, I found this page you're talking about. So, what exactly are these remnants doing if the Thalmor are just 100% driven out of Hammerfell altogether, and there's no longer a Thalmor for them to resist?
Alright, so that's a good question, and I do have an answer for it, but when I was investigating kind of how the Aldmeri Dominion could have hired out the Alik'r warriors as assassins, right, I'm thinking to myself, now, I don't know if there's like an official document of this. I've read some of the books from the Legate in Skyrim regarding the Second Treaty of Stros Mackay, and I've found that all military personnel were forced out of Hammerfell from the Second Treaty, as you know, but I don't recall there ever being any line of which Dominion officials are not allowed within Hammerfell, but obviously it would be to conduct official treaty stipulation business only. For instance, paying the war reparations that the Dominion had to pay to Hammerfell. They obviously need to send Thalmor officials to go and conduct those payments accordingly, and, obviously, so the idea, and plus, I think it's no surprise that the Thalmor have access to Cyrodiil, and definitely we know Skyrim, so that's another reason why the Remnant exist, to be in Skyrim and definitely Hammerfell, and maybe even other locations like Cyrodiil too, to ensure that the Aldmeri Dominion is not sneaking into their country and causing, shenanigans, trying to do all that kinds of stuff. So that's kind of the purpose of the Remnants, is they are trying to ensure that, first and foremost, the Aldmeri Dominion holds up to their treaty stipulations, and secondly, to ensure that any business at all that is conducted with the Thalmor, because just because the war is won and the treaty was signed doesn't mean that they don't conduct business with one another, or that even so much that the Dominion is not allowed within Hammerfell. I don't think they're fully and completely kicked out, but they're there to ensure, okay, this ship came from Somerset Isles. We need to know how many people are on that ship, who is, on there, what person they are, what business they're on. That's the kind of business that they are attending to, and they're doing the same thing in Skyrim and probably Cyrodiil as well, based on what was said in the wiki on the Remnants, that they're ensuring that, hey, they can still break treaty stipulations outside of their borders. In Skyrim borders Hammerfell. It would be very easy for them to make their way into Hammerfell and to set up a secret rooted out connection, because they can have an outpost in Hammerfell without knowing it. It's called espionage,
Yeah.
The Soviets had spies in Los Alamos, and they didn't even realize it until the 1950s when they conducted an investigation on the Soviet spies. That's kind of the similar network that you have going on, that the Americans obviously had, and of course the Soviets had the KGB, and the Nazis had the Gestapo. That's kind of the thing that I'm getting at here regarding the Remnants. They're to ensure the treaty stipulations, which, again, I found this and I was like, how would the Aldemary Dominion have even been able to hire out these warriors in general on unofficial business? Because surely this hiring out could not have been legal. I don't think hiring an assassin is legal in general, right?
Mm-mm.
So, that we can agree on is definitely against the law of, hiring out an assassin to kill somebody. Whether you give someone the gun to kill somebody or you do it yourself, it's still hecka illegal. But that's what encompasses the Remnants group and their business in Skyrim, Hammerfell, and even Cyrodiil. So,
I mean, even if we were to accept that, I honestly still feel that it's a bit of a stretch to act like to say that the resistance is, quote, alive and well just off of that alone. And when it comes to the Cold War, there was a lot more going on than just the border patrol, like how right now we have the border with Mexico, and we're constantly monitoring to see Latin people coming up. It's a lot. Back in the Cold War, it was a lot more than that.
100%.
Yeah, and so if the Remnants are basically just Hammerfell's equivalent to the border patrol, we're not exactly. It would be kind of a stretch to say in 2024 that the resistance against the Mexican cartel is alive and well just because we're trying to secure our southern border. So, again, we're going back to the whole how much do we hold each party to their strict letter of the word, and how much do we give them the benefit of the doubt? Because you're trying to give Kematu a lot of the benefit of the doubt when he's saying things that are strictly speaking incompatible with your narrative, but I'm trying to do the same thing for Saadia. So how much of it are we just forgiving and holding to double standards because of what we've already decided is the correct path? How much of our assessment of the evidence is basically just self-fulfilling prophecy? And I think both of us can partially be guilty of that to some degree, and that's just what makes this quest so deliciously ambiguous.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And, like I said, word choice is always something that you can just delve into it. You look at me, you saw me, delving in, and I was going a little too deep, in my opinion, on Saadia's, or could have been going a little too deep into Saadia's story, but I want to investigate when someone's lying, and I look at, because, that's kind of the commonality between Kematu and Saadia, is that someone is not telling the truth, or rather, so they're both not telling the truth, but someone is very clearly more guilty than the other, depending on how you look at it. And like I said, yes, the word choice alone could have been better on Kematu's part, but as I said, he doesn't give definitive word choice that would otherwise say that they're lying to each other. Just for me personally, when I see that, I don't quite think of saying resistance fully means the fighting, because that's where you're getting at here, is he's saying they're fighting the Thalmor when obviously they're not. The war ended 20 years ago between them. But me, I see it as the resistance speaking out against them, just as Saadia had done, is alive and well. And that would be true in and of itself for Saadia to do. Anyone who speaks out against them clearly has resistance against their authority and who they are. It just, it's clear. The word resistance is a lenient word that can be interpreted in different ways. Now, whether or not you still think of it as a definite guilty stamp of Kematu is lying because he implied fighting, but it's exactly that. It's implied from your perspective that he meant fighting, and it's more intended from me of it's open to interpretation from the examples I said about the Soviet Union. And regarding your point about the remnants, is that the remnants is not just a border patrol. Rather, they do all kinds of things. They are constantly keeping tabs on Thalmor agents. They're keeping tabs on the presence of the Aldemir Dominion, what they could be doing. They're definitely down at the southern border, ensuring who comes into Skyrim or who comes into Hammerfell, not just the border, but with Skyrim and Cyrodiil as well. And they're ensuring that treaty stipulations like the war reparations are being upheld. So it's more than just border patrol. Probably not to the extent of what I said regarding the communist resistance and whatnot, but you get what I'm trying to say here in the kind of the connection of how they relate to each other. The resistance is alive and well in the West. So
while you were saying that, I actually thought of something that I'd like to point out. If we could go,
can you hold that thought real quick? I really need to go to the bathroom. Sorry.
Alrighty.
I'll be like 10 seconds, I promise.
Okay. Should have gone the last time we had the intermission, honestly. Anyway.
I didn't have to go then.
Well, whatever. Anyway, you mentioned earlier that it would be very easy for the Dominion to have outposts in Hammerfell in secret. You're saying it's called espionage, and you used the Soviets as an example. Well, the thing I just remembered something there's a huge difference between the Cold War and Tamriel that makes it pretty much impossible for the Thalmor to have a secret outpost, and that is that there's actually a clear racial divide that would basically be a dead giveaway if the Thalmor were to try to sneak into Hammerfell. In the Cold War, Russians were basically just white people, and if they could mimic an American accent, which isn't that hard to do with practice, they could blend in with the United States like nobody's business. High Elf in Hammerfell, which is mostly black population, and not just black population, but a group of people who are so racist against elves that it practically borders on genocide. Like, it's practically like it would. From the stories that I've heard, the Red Guards hate elves to such a degree that it could give Hitler a run for his money. In terms of
that's accurate.
Yeah, and so if a high elf were to try to sneak into Hammerfell, he would not be able to hide the fact that he's a high elf nearly as well as a Russian could hide the fact that he's not an American. And they would. So that alone would be a huge obstacle to Thalmor having a secret outpost in Hammerfell that is that they just compared to Russian spies. And I think that's something that we definitely need to consider there.
Yeah. Can I say one quick thing?
Of course.
Obviously, I am not doubting at all what you said, but even then, the Russians, like in Los Alamos, as I said, for instance, had a German who was a British citizen spying on behalf of the Soviets in Los Alamos. So they were very capable, and obviously I think you and I can both agree that it's a lot safer to have an unaffiliated person of your nationality conducting the espionage, not high elves. If a high elf was in Hammerfell, he would be heavily monitored by the remnants and by Red Guards in general. Like, he better be there on his official business and get the heck out of there. And he's not welcome in any other part. So all the more reason why it would be even more difficult to conduct espionage and conduct secret operations inside of Hammerfell. It wouldn't be feasible. It would be so difficult. Even if they used unaffiliated races like I don't know, like Nords or Imperials to go into that. Yeah.
I mean, I don't think the Red Guards are genocidal towards Khajiits. I think it's just elves.
Yeah, I was going to say Bosmer, but I realized as well that, yeah, they're not only a part of the Dominion, they're elves as well, but...
If it ends with Myrrh, they're an elf.
Yeah. Yeah, but no, you're 100% right on that. So I'd imagine, I'll confess, I'm not overly familiar with how welcoming Hammerfell is to other races that are not Elven. I would imagine they'd be willing to let them come in and have citizenship or something along those lines, but I don't know how they compare to Skyrim. I can only assume that after the Great War, they're going to be extraordinarily hard-pressed on anybody from the Dominion, and you gotta remember, even Elsewhere was a part of the Aldemari Dominion, but that's a little more loosely knit than it is with actual elves. But yeah, so kind of my point with the whole espionage thing is, if they even try to do it, they would have to do it with another race. There's no way a high elf could be in there conducting hidden ops. To your point. So you are right about that. And again, like I said, the remnants would be all over it. They're all over Hammerfell. They're a huge network.
Right. So, I think that takes us to really the final major point of the whole controversy, which is, if you hand Saadia in, her remains will appear in the Whiterun catacombs, which, for Team Saadia, we are of the belief that this basically means she dies in Whiterun's outer perimeter, which basically means Kematu kills her himself. Now, Team Kematu is typically of the opinion that this is purely a game mechanic, and frankly, I find that this is one of the biggest reasons why I personally demanded the whole Occam's razor thing, because this has got to be the stretchiest of stretches that Team Kematu has ever done up to this point. And buckle yourself in, because this is going to be, because I got a long discussion about this before I'm going to give the floor back to you, because there's just so many things wrong with this. I got to get through them all. First of all, if you're going to say something is a game mechanic, I would much like there to be some sort of actual reference in the game's code saying that this is basically just a scripting error. I'd like to see something in the code that says that the game sees that Kematu is removed from the game and wrongfully assumes that means she's dead. And that should not all be that difficult to come by, because let me give you an example of something similar that happens that we know for a fact is just a scripting error. And that is that if you conquer Windhelm for the Imperials, Yorleaf will remain as steward. Now, if we accept that as canon, then that's a huge thing. That implies that Yorleaf has been a double agent this entire time, which is a huge contribution to the lore, and yet we know that it's just a scripting error. And the reason we know that is because people have actually pulled open the game's code and actually pointed to and said, here, you can see there's scripting that says that Captain Lonely Gale is supposed to become the steward, but the script to remove your leaf from the position actually has a typo in it compared to the other stewards whose scripting actually works, so his scripting doesn't work, so he never gets removed, and that's why Lonely Gale is never able to take the position. So that's one instance where we know for a fact that that this lore thing is actually just a scripting error. So if Saadia's remains ending up in the Whiterun catacombs was likewise just a scripting error, then I want to see something, anything in the game's code that actually points to this. They did it with your leaf, so why can't they do it with Saadia? But let's also think for a minute that if this has got to be the absolute worst quest for this particular scripting error to occur. If ever this scripting error was ever going to happen, they really picked the worst quest for it to happen, because and when I say they, I just mean like the Fates, not Bethesda, because obviously if it's an error, that means Bethesda didn't do it on purpose. Anyway, because this is the one quest in the game where it is up in the air whether or not Saadia actually dies, and it actually matters a great deal whether or not Saadia actually dies. Now contrast that with, for example, the destruction of the Vigilance of Stendarr at the beginning of the Dawnguard quest. We know there's at least one survivor who flees to Isran for protection, but theoretically, could there be some other survivors out there? It's never made clear, but at the same time, it doesn't really matter. At the end of the day, the narrative purpose for destroying that place is that the vampires are established as a credible threat who need to be stopped. And even if we assume that there are other survivors, that narrative function is accomplished just fine. So this is one of those times where it may be up in the air whether someone dies, but it also doesn't really matter in the grand scheme of things. But here, with Saadia, oh, it matters. Oh, it matters a ton whether or not Saadia actually dies in Whiterun's outer perimeter or not. And that's so if this was ever going to be a scripting error to this effect, the Fates really picked the worst possible quest for that to happen. And now combine that with the fact that there really is absolutely no evidence that it's actually a scripting error. And frankly, those who insist that it's just a scripting error are just trying to rationalize the decision that they've already made and trying to justify it. So, and even Campbellworks even tries to come up with some ad hoc justification as to how it can be rationalized in lore, which is honestly even more of a stretch, in my opinion, than just saying it was a scripting error. Because he says that she was found guilty, executed, and then, they sent her remains back to Whiterun? Why would they do that, though? She has no connection to Whiterun other than it being the most recent place where she hid. That there's no reason. I mean, if they didn't want to bury her remains themselves, they could have just thrown it into a trench for dogs to eat, which is what the Roman Empire used to do to most of their crucifixion victims, except for the Jewish ones, because the Jewish religion did require that their dead be buried, and that was one of the conceits that the Roman Empire gave to the Jews so that they could be assimilated. But for the pagans who were crucified, they were just, their bodies were just tossed into a ravine for dogs to eat. And I honestly see no reason why the Hammerfell government would do anything more for Saadia if they were just executing a traitor. And I certainly see no reason why they would go to such extreme lengths as to return her remains just for the sake of giving her a quote-unquote proper burial, when if they were going to do that, they would just as easily have just done it themselves. Either they care enough about her to give her a proper burial, at which point they would just do it at Hammerfell, or they wouldn't want to do it, at which point it would just be easier for them to just throw the body away. So, the in-universe justification is absolutely ludicrous, and calling it a scripting error, there's just no evidence to support that, when frankly there should be evidence. So, that was my really long rant about why I believe Saadia's remains appearing in the catacombs is a huge point in Saadia's favor. So, your thoughts?
Yeah, so a lot to unpack there, and I do fully commend you for that explanation. I think there's a lot of heat in what you said, and a lot of respectable arguments that were made in that response. And I mean, you and me both agree, this is the pinnacle that decides whether or not, or I shouldn't say whether or not, how people decide based on who's guilty and who's not. And I will concede, I don't have the game's code on me to be able to present to you here and now that it is a bug. However, that does not mean that I don't have a rebuttal, and a good one at that, to present to you based on what you just said. So, do I believe that it is a bug in the game?
You're breaking up. You're breaking up again.
Hello?
I could barely hear you say hello. You're still breaking up.
Test.
I heard you say test.
Does my voice sound like it's breaking up?
That I heard loud and clear.
Good. All right. One of the things that I've noticed when unmentioned is, do I believe that it was a game mechanic bug that you in my notes that I presented to you?
You're breaking up again. I heard you say, do I believe it was a game mechanic? So,
what is happening here? Well, this is kind of a stinker. Why is it breaking up like that?
I heard those last two sentences.
My Wi-Fi's not poop. At least it shouldn't be. Let me just double check something real quick. Yeah, I've got 4 bars right now.
You have a wife?
No. I've got 4 bars, green bars, in my video connected.
Oh, Wi-Fi, not wife. Okay.
Yeah, Wi-Fi.
Oh, damn.
Yeah. One thing that went unmentioned by you in your video and last debate, and even in that explanation now, is I don't have code to present to you right here and now, I'll confess. But there's one event that the Dragonborn can do that you did not make mention of. We can kill Saadia. You mentioned that there was the fact that Burial Urn, like a lot of other Skyrim NPCs, was made for her. That, my friend, is the explanation, by and large, to what you're looking for. We have every ability to kill Saadia right in front of Kematu, and we know that that was a strictly implemented game mechanic on Bethesda's part, because Kematu has his own line of dialogue where he says, you know, what, you ruined everything when we kill her. And if we kill her, her burial urn, sure enough, will definitely be in Whiterun.
Right, because she died in the outer perimeter of Whiterun. Okay, breaking up again. Damn it, breaking up again. For fuck's sake.
That's weird, because your camera is also like fuzzy and kind of weird when I see you. I don't know if you saw that, but it was like kind of fidgety. It's not where it was when you said you were breaking up.
And I've got the bit rate for this stream pretty damn low.
Yeah, I don't know what's going on here. I'm sitting on 79 ms, so it's still green for me.
Yeah, and it's green for me too.
That is weird. I don't know if it could have to do with this with the stream or not, or if it's my Wi-Fi. I'd freaking hate it if it was my Wi-Fi.
Or maybe it's either Discord or my OBS. Discord is the only thing the two of us have in common. Son of a bitch.
So Bennis actually just told me that for him on the stream, your camera is smooth, but mine is kind of the one that's whack. So that's what he told me, at least from the stream.
I guess we could. Yeah. By the way, Bennis is somebody that for those of you watching at home, he's somebody we've been talking to. Also, and I'm planning on doing a debate stream with him too. Anyway.
Huh. I mean, I don't know how else to solve this. Maybe I should turn my camera off, maybe?
We're almost done with the stream. Let's just suck it up, and we'll figure this out tomorrow.
That's fine.
Let's just, let's just force through it.
I'll just really finish up what I'm saying here, and Kematu, we can kill Saadia, which implies and makes sense how her burial urn appears there. That, to me, is part of the explanation of how her burial urn is there in the first place. And we're talking about two events that can take place, either we kill her or we don't, that coincide with each other and coincide with her NPC being removed from the game. And I mean, as you know, it is widely accepted amongst the Skyrim community that this is more possibly than not a bug in the game's mechanics. Not that that says it's true. I'm not saying that mob rule means that it's true. I'm just saying that that's what people have accepted. And as I said, I will concede I don't have the evidence in the proof to show you that it's in the game's code, but that cuts both ways. Aside from the burial urn, do we have any evidence, any concrete details evidence whatsoever that Kematu stabbed her in the freaking back? No, we don't. After they disappear, we never see them again, ever. Done. That's done. The burial urn is all you're going off of, and this is a controversy and a half of whether or not it's true or whether or not it's a game mechanic. And it makes more sense in my mind for it to be a bug, because number one, those exist in this game that's, 12 or 13 years old? I don't even know anymore. Years old. And two, because it coincides with an event that we can conduct, killing her that is, that would make it make sense. That's why I think it's a bug in the game's code, because, again, to try to suggest that it's not, to try to suggest that he actually murdered her would just be, it's too much of a stretch. There's not enough I say not enough, there is no concrete evidence that he killed her. We don't see it, there's no evidence left behind, no blood where the grass was, nothing. And to that point, it clearly should mean that someone found Saadia, right? Now, if someone found Saadia, are we trying to say that Kematu just left her body out in the open? Like, surely you wouldn't do that as Kematu, leave her body out in the open for someone to find and go, oh no, Saadia died, let me just, take her body back. And plus, her burial urn is filled with her remains. We don't know definitively that her body is in that coffin. It could just be that they noticed she's gone from the Bannered Mare and that she disappeared with all of her belongings still left behind that they decide to put her belongings in a burial urn because they assume she died. That's the other possible explanation. Of course, I'm going to be honest, I don't really like Camelwork's explanation about how they sent her body back to the White Run. It doesn't make any sense to me. That, to me, doesn't make a whole lot of sense. Game mechanic bug, that's my explanation, my rebuttal.
How did it... So... I'm trying to remember because I forgot to jot this down. It's been... trying to think back to what you used to say here. You said... Oh, yeah. If you can kill her, if you do kill her, her urn will appear in the catacombs. But of course that makes sense because at that point, yes, she really does die canonically, like in universe. It makes sense that she would be in the Hall of the Dead because we know she's dead. She isn't just like Montieri, who, if you don't kill him per the Emperor's last request, he just returns to his home country in Cyrodiil, and he's just removed from the game, but he's not actually, he doesn't show up in the catacombs anywhere because he's not dead. When you kill Saadia by your own hand, yeah, she's removed from the game and she's dead. But if you just let Kematu take her away, she's just removed from the game. It's not a case of...
And it's still used by the same system, the body pickup cleanup system that Skyrim has, because they don't want NPCs cluttering the dang game. You'd lag like crazy.
Yeah, well, here's the thing. You say that you don't have the code in front of you, but people do. Other people do, and they've had it for over 12 years. That's how they found the code regarding your leaf. So it's been 12 years now. Someone, somewhere out there would have found the code by now, if it existed. But here's the thing. There's also you mentioned the whole mob rule thing. There's also a bit of a conspiracy theory going around regarding Oblivion, where the arena was largely cut short, was largely meant to be a lot more fleshed out, and that it was like 60% completed in Oblivion, but then they just removed it for no reason. But there's no evidence for that either, and Patrician TV gives a very compelling reason as to why we shouldn't believe the rumors. I believe his exact words were, despite how easy it would be to prove, get a copy of a day one disc of Oblivion, put it in a computer without internet connection so that no automatic updates can happen, and crack open the code and show us the files. I believe that was in his Skyrim retrospective, not his Oblivion one, but whatever. The important thing is he points out how easy it would be to prove. Likewise, if you think this is meant to just be a scripting error, it would be so easy to prove if you knew if the people in 12 years now could have just gotten a copy of the Skyrim 11.11.11 release date disc, put it in a computer without internet connection, cracked open the code, and found the code where it says that if Saadia gets taken away, that they think that means she's dead, but it doesn't do that with literally anyone else. They did it with your leaf, so why can't they do it with Saadia? If it's been over 12 years, going on 13 years now. So if this really was just a coding thing, someone out there, you don't have the code in front of you, but someone, somewhere on planet Earth would have found it by now. So that's my rebuttal to that.
Hey, that's fair. That's understandable. I can appreciate the rebuttal. And you bring up valid arguments with that, you know. Like I said, I've conceded I don't have the code. Like I said, my only basic idea and consensus toward the fact that this is a bug is, in my own experience of programming, these things happen in these functions that are unintended. In other words, you have to remember, is Saadia, after the quest is done, is an essential NPC? Am I correct in that assessment?
Saadia, up until the quest is done, is an essential NPC. She loses her essential status once she's standing outside the horses.
So she is essential before the mission starts, but like after, if you side with Saadia, can you kill her?
No, wait, hold on. Skyrim, the USP actually has an article on essential NPCs. So let's scroll down to the S's. Sabine. So no, Saadia would be at the top of the list because of the S's, because her name begins with an S and then 2 A's. So Sabine Knight is one of the essentials, is the first one of the S's, and that's an SAB. So Saadia is never essential. From the minute you exit Helgen, she is killable.
Interesting. Here. I've never tried to do it, so I wouldn't know.
I'll screen share for you. See? Here it is.
Okay.
Hold on. Yeah, see? Sabine Knight, which alphabetically comes after Saadia. Saadia is not listed in the essential NPCs at all.
Okay. Honestly, I've never tried to kill her before the mission started or after it started. She's in the Bannered Mare all the time, so I never thought to do that. Yeah. Probably after this debate, I'll load up the game and see if I can, just out of curiosity. But either way. So they made her non-essential, meaning she can be killed by the Dragonborn in that moment. And just like I said, that's my way of seeing that and going, this aligns with the fact of her burial urn appearing in the Hall of the Dead. And unfortunately, I don't think this question will ever be answered, because while I don't have the code in front of me, and as you said, could be very well true that people don't have the code in general, someone would have found it by now, it cuts both ways. There is no concrete evidence at all that would suggest that Kematu murdered Saadia. No blood. Okay, we are very familiar with concrete evidence. I know you're familiar with the Windhelm murder criminal mission, where you literally look for blood on tombstones. You look for all kinds of clues to find the murder. This would have been something that could have been put in the game. A blood splatter left where she was paralyzed, a blood trail that led to her body, or something along those lines, or the murder weapon left behind. We have things in Skyrim regarding these clues that we can see, blood spatters that are left, all kinds of stuff, yet nothing. There's no concrete evidence whatsoever to suggest that Kematu murdered Saadia, and, unfortunately, I think that this just is kind of a double-edged sword. I can't prove definitively that it's a game mechanic. I have my speculations and my, reasons that I believe to be logical that would suggest that it is a bug in the game's mechanics, because more often than not, these bugs are unintended. Remember, the time for which we're allowed to kill Saadia, in and of the moment, is when she's paralyzed. That's when we can kill her. And if she's not essential all the time, every time, that means that she will definitely have a burial urn ready for her inside of Skyrim. So I would argue that her being non-essential further argues against the idea that Kematu murdered her, because at that point you're taking into all kinds of counts, like what happens if you spawn up a bunch of werewolves inside the Bannered Mare and she dies, or what happens if the Dragonborn accidentally kills her in the Bannered Mare before, after, or during the mission. So that's kind of just my reason why I think of it as a bug, because bugs are not easily identifiable and they're not intended either in the game's code. It's more often than not a matter of the dead body cleanup system that came in, took her NPC away, and because she's registered in the game's code as a citizen of Whiterun, we know that to be true definitively, that she is a citizen of Whiterun, of the Whiterun hold, that her body appears, or that her remains appear in the urn in the Hall of the Dead. So that's me. My rebuttal there.
Just one last thing before we wrap up. You mentioned the Blood on the Ice quest, and just an FYI, I just am sick to death of Bethesda and their shitty attempts at writing detective quests, because nearly every single time in Morrowind, in Oblivion, in Skyrim, it's always solved by the culprit just leaving his damn diary around where he just confesses to fucking everything. And like at one point in Oblivion, you literally find the evidence because the guy left it in his hotel room. He left his diary in his hotel room where he just confesses to the murders. And for fuck's sake, Bethesda, why do you keep putting these damn detective quests in your games when you suck at writing them? Like, I've got a video on my channel. The, top 5 Elder Scrolls quests that make no sense, and literally the entire number 1 entry isn't even dedicated to one quest, it's just dedicated to every single detective quest or exposing government corruption quest in the entire franchise. These quests are the bane of what is otherwise an incredible franchise. And if Bethesda is going to insist on continuing to do them, they really need to go out and hire some best-selling murder mystery novelist to actually write a compelling murder mystery story for them, because they can't do it themselves for shit.
Well, that I will say we agree on after this debate, because, like I said, even playing that stupid Windhelm murder quest, the hold guards can't figure out who the murderer is, and they can never catch him in time, in broad daylight, in the graveyard where everybody's passing around. So even I'm sitting here thinking to myself, this is kind of a pissy little quest to find a murderer who is leaving so much evidence behind in his wake. Not at all what a murderer would do, but that's the writing that Bethesda sticks to in multiple other games. That's not just Skyrim, and it's the writing that I'm going to use as my evidence. Since, hey, do I agree with it? Not at all. That's not at all. You and me both, man, agree that murderers don't just do that. They don't haphazardly write that they did the crime and incriminate themselves. You know, they should at least try to be calculated in what they do. So that's just, but yeah, what can you do, right?
Yeah, and yet you scoff at the Windhelm Guard's incompetence at investigating serial killer, yet you use the Alik'r's incompetence to justify why they weren't hired by the Thalmor. I mean, which is it? Honestly.
It's whatever.
Yeah, but hey, this was a lot of fun today. I'm really glad I brought you on, and I'd love to have. By the way, we're planning on doing more streams like this if we can work out the connection issues that keep him from breaking up all the time. We're going to be doing more streams like this in the future on a more or less a regular basis. So stay tuned for the full announcement of what that entails. We've been planning this for a while now, how we're going to start doing regular streams together. So, Senate, anything else you'd like to say before we sign off?
No, nothing. It was a fun debate, you know. I mean, granted, I don't think either of us have changed our minds, but you know what? It was still fun and informative that we both got to share our perspectives on this matter, and I'm glad that we can do it, because when people talk to each other like this, you know, we begin to understand, you know, where the other person's coming from, you know, instead of just our side is the only side and it's either my way or the highway.
Oh, yeah. Like in politics. Oh, man.
Yeah. So, but no, your side definitely has given me a lot more insight. Despite my opinion not being changed, it has definitely given me a little more insight about Saadia's side of the story.
Yeah. Well, thank you all for coming out to the stream today. So I guess I am Acerthorn. This has been the Senate, and I guess we'll both be seeing you guys later. Peace out.